The Prince Who Belonged to an Alpha. Omegaverse Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Reinhardt. Chapter 1 The Wolf Who Should Have Killed Him. The sky burned low over the frosted pass. Ash falling like snow, snow falling like ash. What little light the moon offered was fractured by smoke and the red smear of distant fires. The wind reeked of blood and char, howling across the ruined border like a beast with no master. Eryan Thayre didn't stumble, he ran. His lungs tore against each breath. His legs stung with old frostbite wounds reopened. But still he ran. Behind him, the black fong trackers howled, their low guttural howls echoing off stone and ice, chasing him through the skeletal remains of what had once been a northern outpost. He'd crossed the border. He shouldn't have. But the only thing worse than the wolves ahead were the ghosts behind. He crested the ridge and slid down a collapsed ravine. The snow broke beneath his boots and swallowed him to the knees. There was no path forward, only ruin and flame, but he pushed onward, heart pounding with a rhythm not entirely his own. Then the scent changed. Not blood, not fire. Alpha. Too late. Something crashed behind him. Eryan spun, knife in hand, but it was no soldier that emerged from the smoke. It was a shadow streaked with firelight. A beast, obsidian black and immense, its fur gleaming with streaks of molten gold that pulsed like veins of lava beneath volcanic stone. Golden eyes locked onto him, unblinking. The air grew taut, thinner than mountain frost. The wolf, no, the alpha, lowered its head, growled. He didn't even scream when it lunged. Eryan hit the ground hard, pinned beneath the massive weight, throat exposed. The blade clattered uselessly from his fingers. Hot breath fanned across his face as the wolf bared its teeth, and for one frozen instant, everything in the world narrowed to its jagged fangs and the golden light behind its gaze. He should have been torn apart, but something stopped it. Eryan, acting on pure instinct, or something older, raised a trembling hand and touched the beast's throat. A pulse, not under skin but through it. Their souls collided. Like iron striking the forge, the contact seared into both of them. The wolf jerked back with a snarl so violent it shook the ground. Eryan's vision fractured. His body convulsed. Pain like lightning. Heat that didn't belong in the snow. And then, breath. The wolf's. Tangled. The world spun. Eryan gasped. And the last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the beast shifting mid-snarl. Bones cracking. Fur vanishing into flesh. A man now. Tall, shirtless. Snow clinging to his skin like reverence. Long black hair streaked with gold like a fallen crown. Golden eyes. Still burning. Still watching. Still furious. "Don't move," said a voice like steel on snow. Eryan's eyes fluttered open. Pain screamed through his limbs, and cold gripped his spine with merciless fingers. Firelight danced across stone above him. Shadows shifted. There were figures in the corner, guards, maybe, but all his blurred gaze could lock onto was the figure kneeling beside him. The Alpha. Now in human form, he looked no less dangerous. His torso was bare, smeared with ash and blood that didn't seem to belong to him. A thick black and gold fur cloak hung from his shoulders. Every inch of him screamed power, barely restrained. "You should be dead," the Alpha said. Eryan coughed. "Trust me, I tried." One of the guards moved. The Alpha raised a hand and they stopped. "You crossed the frosted pass. That alone is treason against the Accord." "I don't remember," Eryan said, voice hoarse. "Anything. I just ran." "A lie." "But only partly." The Alpha's golden gaze narrowed. "You touched my throat." Eryan stared at the stone floor. "Did I? That's not something a human forgets. I don't even know who I am." Silence. Long calculating. "Convenient," the Alpha muttered. Then he stood. His cloak swept the floor like nightfall. I should have let my jaws close. I should have torn your heart out when I had the chance. Eryan tensed, though he knew he couldn't fight, not like this. But, the Alpha said, eyes briefly flicking toward Eryan's chest, where bandages had been wrapped hastily over the claw marks. My blood says otherwise. He turned to the guards. Bind him. Chain-light cuffs. He's to be taken to Dreamer. Eryan's heart sank. Dreamer Fortress. A wolf stronghold. The guards moved quickly, wrapping his wrists in glowing metal that bit cold and then numb into his bones. His legs were too weak to resist. He was lifted, half-dragged, half-carried. Wait, he croaked. Who are you? The Alpha paused at the door. Rovek Draelen, he said, not turning back. Commander of the North Watch. Alpha to the Bloodspine line. His name struck something in Eryan. Not memory, just wait. Then Rovek added, almost too soft to hear, I don't know why my blood didn't let me kill you, but I'll find out. Eryan was already slipping under again, the cold too deep, too final. But before the darkness took him completely, he heard Rovek's voice one last time, low and bitter, like a curse. I shouldn't have saved you, but my blood betrayed me. And then silence, the kind that only comes before the storm. Chapter 2, The Prisoner in the Alpha's Hall. The room was too warm. Not comfortable, never that, but close, stifling, the kind of heat bred from stone walls and heavy furs and a fire that never slept. Eryan sat still on the edge of the bed, his wrists resting on his knees, cuffed in glowing silver that pulsed like a heartbeat. The chains had been ceremonial at first, then practical, now personal. This was no cell, not in the traditional sense. There were no bars, no straw-lined floors or rusted iron. The chamber was large, carved from mountain rock and draped in obsidian banners marked with the sigil of the Bloodspine line. A golden wolf skull, fangs bared toward the stars. But Eryan knew a prison when he was in one. The guards changed every 4 hours. Meals came on silver trays with bone-handled utensils. He was never cold, never harmed. And not once had he been left alone. The door opened with a thud of ironwood against stone. Rovek Draelen stepped in, his cloak dusted with snow, the cold still clinging to his boots. He didn't speak at first, just stared, eyes golden and sharp, jaw locked. You sleep too well for a man with no past, Rovek said, voice edged like a blade against whetstone. Eryan tilted his head. Perhaps that's because I have nothing to fear, or everything to hide. The chains rattled faintly as Eryan moved, slow, deliberate. You've asked me the same questions every day, because your answers haven't changed, because they're true. Rovek came closer. He didn't sit. Alphas rarely did when they wanted control of the room. He stood over Eryan, a shadow of war and old pain, and folded his arms. I should have killed you at the pass. You said that yesterday. I meant it today. Eryan looked up, calm as ever, silver hair reflecting the flicker of firelight. Then why haven't you? Silence. There it was again, that thrum between them, that unbearable pressure in the air, as if the room was strung with invisible wires, tightening with every breath. Rovek's lip curled. Because my blood won't let me. Because you touched me, and something wrong happened. Wrong. Eryan's gaze sharpened, calculating. Or unexpected? The Alpha snarled. He turned away, pacing toward the hearth. One gloved hand braced on the stone mantel. The firelight cast long shadows across his bare back. The curve of scars crisscrossing skin like a map of battles survived but not forgotten. Then it struck again. The scent changed. The air thickened. Rovek grunted, staggering against the wall, his knees buckling. He barely caught himself on the stone. Eryan stood instantly, His chains clanked, but the moment demanded no hesitation. He crossed the room in 3 strides. "Don't touch me," Rovek hissed, his voice already ragged with pain. "You're burning," Eryan said, reaching out. His fingertips brushed the side of Rovek's throat. The reaction was immediate. Rovek sucked in a breath so harsh it seemed to tear his lungs. The veins across his neck and arms, which had begun to pulse with that familiar bloodlight, dimmed. His skin, moments before feverish, cooled beneath Eryan's hand. And yet, the Alpha trembled. Eryan felt it, not fear but resistance. Pride held taut like a drawstring. He could almost hear Rovek's instinct screaming. "Don't yield. Get off me," Rovek growled through gritted teeth. But Eryan didn't move. "Not yet. I'm not doing anything," he said softly. "You are." That made Rovek snap. He shoved Eryan back, hard enough to send him against the bedpost. The chains rattled again, louder now. "You think this is a game?" Rovek snarled. "You think being able to quiet the curse makes you safe? I think it makes me necessary." That stopped Rovek mid-stride. His chest rose and fell in sharp, furious rhythm. "I don't need a human, especially not one I can't trust." "Then kill me." The air stilled. Eryan's voice was ice, smooth and clear. "Tear me apart, Alpha. Your instincts let me live, but maybe your pride can override them. Try." Rovek stared at him. Something primal flickered in his eyes. Lust, rage, want. Then he turned, storming to the door. "You're not clever, Eryan Thayre. You're a leash I haven't chosen, and I hate being leashed." The door slammed shut behind him. Eryan stood for a long while, breathing hard, not from fear, but from the tremor still alive in his palm where he'd touched Rovek. He sat back on the bed, slowly. So, it was true. The soul bond that triggered at the pass wasn't just instinctual, it was functional. Rovek's blood curse was real, and Eryan's presence quelled it. This wasn't just a spiritual imprint. It was a broken one, and broken things had rules of their own. Elsewhere in the fortress, Rovek slammed a fist against the stone wall of the upper corridor. A sharp crack echoed, stone powder falling from the impact. There Marwyn watched from a distance, arms folded, his own uniform only half buckled. The beta always looked like he'd been up too long, seen too much. "She touched your throat," Thayre said finally. Rovek didn't answer. "And you've been waking with the mark burning since." Still no answer. "I ran diagnostics on the imprint. The bond is incomplete, fragmented. It doesn't behave like a mate mark. It's off." "I know. You should have ended him." Rovek turned sharply, eyes glowing. "I tried." Thayre tilted his head. "What stopped you?" Rovek said nothing, but in his silence was the truth. It wasn't a mate mark, and yet, it felt like one. That night, Rovek dreamed of fire, of snow melting into blood, of silver hair, and eyes like fog, and hands that soothed the fire roaring in his bones. He dreamed of warmth not earned, of comfort not wanted, of a presence that slid into the empty places of his soul like it had always been there. In the dream, he reached for Eryan. "You finally found me," a voice whispered, not his own. "Why did you wait so long?" Rovek opened his eyes. He was in bed, still dressed. The fire had died down. The scar across his ribs wasn't burning for once, but his skin crawled. He rose quickly, stalked to the hallway, and froze. The guards outside Eryan's door were gone. The heavy oak was ajar. The scent trail, faint but present, vanished down the northern stair. The chain cuffs lay on the floor, broken clean through. Not cut, bitten. Rovek's wolf stirred under his skin, agitated. He growled low. "Eryan!" Chapter 3: The Curse That Breathes His Name. The wind howled through Dreamer's northern peaks as if the mountains themselves protested the Alpha's command. Eryan stood at the edge of the sacred path, bound again in fresh chains, though this time not by silver or steel, but by ritual. The path to the bloodfire pool shimmered with runes etched into obsidian stone, ancient symbols pulsing faintly as each step echoed beneath their boots. He didn't ask where they were going. Rovek hadn't told him, and Eryan had learned quickly that some things were better gleaned from silence than forced from reluctant lips. But he could feel it, the shift in the air, the weight of the ancient. Every breath felt like a trespass. "Are you sure about this?" Thayre asked, glancing sideways at Rovek as they passed the gates of the sanctum. Even wolves with full oaths rarely walk the bloodfire. What if he... "I need answers." Rovek cut him off. "Not theories." Thayre said nothing more. They reached the heart of the stone chamber, where molten red light pulsed beneath glassy black rock. A circular pool, carved into the mountain itself, glowed with internal flame. The blood fire. It was said to know all that lived and all that lied. Eryan's gaze settled on the fire. It didn't burn like normal flame. It shimmered like memory. Sivra Halwan waited at the edge of the pool. She was tall, cloaked in bone-white ceremonial garb, her face painted with the ash of blood oaths. Her eyes, one blue, one black, saw through more than flesh. She bowed slightly when Rovek approached, but her stare fixed on Eryan. "That one," she said softly, "is not bound to your dominion, Alpha." "Then tell me what binds him." "He does." Sivra stepped aside. "The flame will reveal his nature. If it consumes him, he's human. If it resists, he's kin." "And if it does neither?" Eryan asked. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Then the forest of oaths will wake." Rovek jerked his head. "Step forward." Eryan didn't hesitate. He moved to the edge of the bloodfire pool and knelt. The heat licked at his skin, but it didn't scorch. No sweat gathered on his brow. He reached out. As his fingers touched the surface of the fire, the room fell into silence. No crackle, no roar, no scream of burning flesh. The flames parted for him. They breathed around his hand, curling, curious, like something long lost recognizing its keeper. Rovek tensed. Sivra inhaled sharply. "It lives in him, but not from him." "What does that mean?" Rovek growled. Sivra's gaze turned grave. "He is not one of us, but he is not one of them either. The fire recognizes oath, not blood. And he carries an oath that was broken, shattered, and buried." Eryan withdrew his hand. It was untouched, perfect, yet his breath trembled. "I don't remember any oath," he murmured. Sivra stepped closer. "That's because it was stolen from you." The flames flared briefly behind her, as if echoing the truth. "You carry fragments of a bond made before time held meaning. A vow that predates the council, before the wolfmark ruled. A blood-deep engraving torn by force. A soul branding," Rovek said, more to himself than to her. His voice was tight. Sivra nodded. "And a dangerous one, because something tried to erase it, and failed." She turned to him. "Alpha, if you keep him here, your oath will erode. Your command will fracture." Rovek stared at Eryan, and for a moment, the fury in his gaze wasn't just fear. It was something more primal, recognition. Not of Eryan's face, but of what lived inside him. And Eryan? He stared back, silent, feeling something bloom beneath his skin. Something alive. That night, they gave him a room with no chains. He was watched, of course. Rovek's paranoia had grown claws, but he could feel the shift. Something about him frightened even the Alpha now. The dreams came before the cold did. Eryan tossed in the dark, breath shallow. The room was too quiet, the air too thick. And then, flames. Not physical, not real, but there. Around him, through him. The scent of ash and burnt clover filled his lungs. A figure stood in the center of the fire, too blurred to make out, except for the eyes. Blue. Shattered blue. They wept. You weren't supposed to live. The voice was cracked, sorrowful. You were meant to die in the fire. Eryan stepped toward it, but the fire pulled back. I begged them not to brand you. I begged. But they said it was the only way to keep you tethered. Who? Eryan whispered. Tethered to what? The figure faltered. The fire turned to smoke. It was me. It was always me. I was the one who marked you. Eryan reached out, desperate. I'm sorry, Eryan. But the dream shattered. He woke with sweat clinging to his skin, heart hammering, throat dry. The walls of the room were stone, unchanged, but he could feel the heat still curling in his chest. And worst of all, he knew that voice. He just couldn't name it. Elsewhere in the fortress, Rovek stood alone on the battlements, wind clawing at his cloak. There it approached from the shadows. You should send him south. Burn the trail. Remove the curse before it roots deeper. He's already rooted. Then sever it. Rovek didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the sigil carved on his palm, a mark that hadn't flared in years. The wolf-bound seal. It now pulsed with faint light, as if responding to something not in his own blood, but someone else's. Alpha, Thayre said quietly. Whatever's in him, it doesn't belong in this world anymore. Rovek turned away from the wind. That's the problem, he murmured. Neither do I. Chapter 4, The Alpha's Restraint. Snow slammed against the stone windows of Dreamer like the fists of the dead. The wind screamed over the high ramparts, rattling iron grates, howling as if it were the voice of the wolf gods themselves. Furious, unrelenting, wild. Rovek stood in the center of the training ground, breath heaving, body slick with sweat that froze the moment it touched the winter air. His claws were halfway formed, bone grinding beneath skin. His back curved like a beast barely restrained by its own skin. He had fought a dozen of his own men to exhaustion. Still it wasn't enough. Still the pull writhed under his skin, snarling with every heartbeat. Alpha! Thayre's voice cut through the storm. You need to stop. Rovek didn't hear him. Or if he did, it wasn't the words that mattered. His eyes, gold-burning black, locked on the one figure standing at the edge of the yard. Silent, unarmed. Eryan. The wind flared his pale cloak like wings, silver hair glinting in the moonlight. The firelight from the training torches caught his cheekbone, too calm for the chaos unfolding before him. Rovek growled low in his throat. Get him out of here, Thayre hissed to the guards. He doesn't know what he's provoking. I know exactly what I'm provoking, Eryan said, voice clear despite the gale. He's burning from the inside out. You think you can calm that? Eryan ignored him. Instead, he stepped forward, into the line of fire. The moment his boots touched the blood-stained stone of the yard, Rovek let out a feral snarl and lunged. The guards shouted. Thayre reached for his blade. But Eryan stood still, and Rovek stopped. Inches from him, breath ragged, chest rising and falling like a storm barely held in a cage. The Alpha's claws twitched in the air. Touch me, Eryan whispered. The command was quiet. Too quiet. Rovek's jaw trembled. His hands shook. But he didn't strike. He reached. One hand, clawed, black-veined, shaking, slid to Eryan's throat. Not squeezing, just resting there, feeling the pulse. The anchor. Why? Rovek rasped. His voice was ruined. Why do you make it stop? I don't, Eryan said. You do. Through me. The Alpha's fingers dug in. Just enough to bruise. Not enough to break. "You're not mine," Rovek muttered. "But my blood says you are. And yours isn't the only blood that speaks," Eryan murmured, stepping closer. They stood in silence, snow turning to ice around them, breath mingling. The rest of the world disappeared, only breath and trembling restraint. Then Rovek broke. He grabbed Eryan by the collar and shoved him backward, through the stone archway, down the dark corridor that led to the private chambers. His movements were clumsy, unlike the precision of the Alpha. He moved like something torn open. Eryan didn't resist. Not when the doors slammed shut. Not when Rovek shoved him against the wall, his breath hot with rage and something darker. Not even when teeth grazed the line of his throat like a promise barely held back. "This isn't who I am," Rovek said through clenched teeth. "I know, but I want to be." Eryan's breath hitched, but not from fear. "Then be it." The silence between them cracked. They collided, not gentle, not tender. Their mouths met with fire, biting through frost. Rovek's hands tore at fabric, desperate to ground himself in something. Someone that wouldn't shatter beneath him. Eryan didn't guide him. He allowed him. That was worse. The world spun. Claws left marks on Eryan's hips, his shoulder, his wrist. Each one a protest against a bond neither of them had chosen. Eryan gasped when Rovek bit too hard, but didn't pull away. Pain meant grounding. He gave it. Rovek took, but only until the shaking stopped. Only until his wolf stilled. Much later, Rovek sat in the shadows of his chamber, bare-chested, head in his hands. "I should have stopped," he muttered. "You did. I almost marked you." Eryan looked at him across the firelit room. There were red lines on his skin that hadn't been there before. But no mark, no claim, only memory. "I wouldn't have let you." "You think you could stop me?" Eryan smiled faintly. "I already did." Rovek's laugh was bitter. "You're dangerous." "I know." They said nothing more. But when Rovek rose, crossing the room like a storm reluctantly leashed, Eryan didn't flinch when his fingers brushed his face again. This time, gently. Rovek cupped his cheek and asked quietly, "Why do I want you, even though everything in me says it's wrong?" Eryan met his eyes. "Because everything in you is changing." And neither of them said what they both knew. That change was already killing something inside of Rovek. Unseen beyond the arched window, they'd watched. His fingers tightened on the stone sill, breath fogging the frost-glazed glass. He'd followed the guards, pretended he was there to report. But he'd seen the way Rovek melted. Not to a wolf's rage, but to him. "Eryan, you're losing yourself," they'd whispered, anger rising like bile. "And he's the one unmaking you." He turned from the window, jaw set. And later that night, in the flickering candlelight of the war chamber, he pulled parchment from the locked drawer and dipped a quill in ink dark as dried blood. He wrote with steady, deliberate strokes. "To Her Majesty Hedra Sane, the heir lives. The wolf has taken him. He sleeps beneath the Alpha's roof. He bleeds in the Alpha's bed." He sealed the letter with the signet of the Northern Guard, bound it with black wax, and handed it to the messenger hawk before the sun rose. South would come, and this time they would come for blood. Chapter 5: The Blood That Shouldn't Bind. The echo of boots striking ancient stone filled Dreamer Citadel's northern hall, each step dragging the weight of betrayal behind it. The air was sharp with smoke and the bitter sting of cold iron. War hung over the fortress like a cloud yet to break. Eryan stood at the center of it. Not in chains, not behind bars, but under eyes, hundreds of them, sharp and gleaming, some glowing with amber wolf sight, some narrowed with suspicion, others widened in disbelief. The northern council chamber, carved into the mountain itself, had not seen this many gathered in over a decade. Lords in slate-gray furs, generals with bone-etched pauldrons, priestesses draped in mourning silk, all waiting for one thing: Rovek Draelen. When the Alpha entered, he did not roar. He spoke. "I received a letter from the Southern Queen this morning," Rovek said, voice hard and clear. "She claims a traitor walks among us. A royal born. A spy." A rustle moved through the chamber like wind across dry grass. Thayre stood near the dais, silent. Only the faintest twitch of his jaw betrayed him. Rovek didn't look at him. Instead, his gaze found Eryan, and held. "This is the man she names," Rovek continued. "Eryan Thayre, presumed dead 15 years ago, blood of the southern line, and the one who, by some cruel tangle of fate, carries a fragment of the wolf-bonded mark that silences my curse." Another wave of murmurs, sharper this time. Someone hissed, "He's human." "No," Rovek said. "He's not." He stepped down from the dais, slow and deliberate, until he stood beside Eryan in the center of the floor. "I won't deny what he is. I won't pretend the mark hasn't tethered us in ways I don't yet understand. But I will say this," his voice dropped, low and edged. "If you think I'll hand him over to Hedrasane, or any who ride under her banners, you do not know me." A beat of silence. Then he said it. "I name Eryan Thayre my war consort." The word hit the chamber like a blow. It wasn't mate. Not yet. But it was enough. Enough to claim. Enough to protect. Enough to doom them both. Eryan didn't flinch. Not even when a half-dozen blades were drawn in shock. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at Rovek. "You should have told me," he said quietly. Rovek's jaw tightened. "Would you have stayed if I did?" "I didn't stay for you," Eryan replied, voice sharp enough to cut. "I stayed for answers." Rovek's hand clenched at his side, but he said nothing. Thayre stepped forward, the picture of loyal concern. "Alpha, the council will not accept a southern royal in our halls, even with your claim." "Then the council can rot," Rovek snapped. "And if your bond fails again, what then?" Thayre asked. "Will you still trust the human to fix it with a touch?" Eryan's voice sliced through the tension. "I'm not his healer," he said coldly. "I'm not his leash, and I'm certainly not his solution." The silence was absolute. Then Rovek stepped closer, too close. "You think I did this to use you?" Eryan didn't move. "You did it to keep breathing. Don't confuse survival with love." Rovek flinched like the words had teeth. Eryan turned from him before he could reply. "I'll find the source of this curse myself," he said. "And when I do, you'll no longer need me." "And if I still want you?" Rovek asked, voice low. Eryan didn't answer. He walked out of the council chamber without waiting for permission. Not one guard stopped him. Not even Thayre. The night came heavy with ice and the promise of more snow. Eryan moved like a ghost through the lower halls of Dreamer, deeper than he had ever dared, past locked gates and bone-ruined thresholds, past braziers that burned with a blue-white flame that never needed fuel. He found the door only because something in him remembered it. Not a memory, a pull. The sigils on the obsidian stone pulsed as he approached. Not with threat, but recognition. The forbidden flame vault, once sealed by ancient blood. Now it opened for him. Inside, the air was blistering. Not hot, but volatile. Like heat that hadn't decided whether it wanted to burn or bless. A circular chamber stretched before him, blackened stone walls inscribed with ancient tongues. In the center, a pool of fire, still as glass, deep as memory. It didn't flicker. It breathed. Eryan stepped closer, and the walls came alive. Symbols he could not name glowed red, gold, violet. one after another lighting up in a ring, until a single phrase seared across the back wall, scrawled in old tongue and blood-etched fire. To sever the blood bond, offer the name that was stolen. Eryan froze. The words didn't make sense, but his body reacted before his mind caught up. His heart pounding, his breath short, a sick, rising certainty crawling up his spine. The name that was stolen. He had always known there were gaps in his childhood, blanks disguised as scars, a haze where a name should have rooted him. He had felt it in the fire, in the dreams, in Rovek's voice, whispering a name he'd never given. You finally found me. Was that the name he had forgotten, or the one he was never supposed to know? A pulse rippled through the flames, and for the first time Eryan didn't feel like prey. He felt like the knife. Far above, in the Queen's private sanctum hundreds of miles south, Hedrasane pressed her hand to the fresh reply she had received. Sealed in dreamer wax, she broke it open. Only 4 words written in ink that shimmered like old blood. He remembers the fire. Her hand trembled. She turned to the assassin waiting at the door. Send them. Now. If the wolf won't kill him, we will. Chapter 6. The touch that burned the wrong name. The wind in Dreamer's forest had turned mean. It sliced through bare branches and rattled frozen leaves like bones in a jar. Dusk hadn't fallen, not fully, but the sky dimmed like an eye half closing, and the frost along the ground clung tighter with every breath. Eryan walked ahead of Rovek. The space between them stretched taut. Too close, and the alpha's steps faltered. Too far, and the bond's strange heat surged like fever. They hadn't spoken in over a mile. The silence wasn't peaceful. It throbbed with tension. Rovek's breath sounded ragged behind him. Then he stopped walking. Wait! Rovek ground out. Don't move. Eryan turned. It's getting worse. The alpha's hands were clenched, shaking slightly, fingers twitching as though something just beneath the skin wanted out. I can't. Rovek gritted his teeth. When I'm near you, it splits, like something trying to dig through me to get to you. Eryan's eyes narrowed. You said our marks resonated. They did. They still do. But now, Rovek's voice broke, low and strangled. Now it's like it's correcting itself, as if something's trying to push me out. Eryan took a step forward. Rovek fell to his knees. A growl, low and sharp, tore from the alpha's throat. Not human, not in control. And then, his body shifted. Not a full transformation. Not the sleek, regal beast Eryan had glimpsed before, but a twisted partial shift. Nails elongating into claws. Eyes burning red gold. Veins beneath skin laced with shadow. Rovek, Eryan said, voice cold but calm. No response. The alpha lunged. Eryan barely managed to twist aside. Rovek's claws raked the tree behind him, bark splitting like paper. The air turned acrid with burning scent, spirit fire. Not physical flame, but the tearing of something more essential. Rovek, fight it! A snarl. And this time, teeth caught Eryan's shoulder. Not deep, not lethal, but intentional. And wrong. Pain lanced through him and something else. The moment Rovek tasted blood, his body jerked back. His snarl turned to a gasp, then a moan, and then stillness. The forest fell silent. Rovek collapsed, half wolf, half man, panting on the ground. Eryan knelt beside him, blood trailing down his collarbone, soaking into his tunic. Rovek's voice came hoarse, wet with something close to shame. I didn't mean to. Eryan didn't answer, because something in him had changed the moment Rovek bit down. It hadn't just hurt. It had reacted. A resonance beneath the pain. A pulse beneath the skin. As if the fire in the vault had heard it. As if something else had answered. They didn't return to the main keep. Sivra Halwan summoned them directly to Moonrest Hold, the sacred healing sanctuary for Dreamer's Alpha line. Its walls were layered with ashwood and wolfsbane stone, enchanted against madness. But none of that eased the tension. Rovek lay on the central bed, still half-shifted, skin steaming faintly. Eryan stood beside him, shoulder bandaged, jaw tight. Sivra examined the wound in silence. Then she pulled back, eyes narrowing at Eryan's forearm. "Show me your mark." Eryan hesitated. "Now," she said. He lifted his sleeve. The old wolf mark shimmered beneath the skin. But something new hovered just beside it. A faint, ghostly brand, like the scar of a vow burned too deep. Sivra's face went pale. "This isn't natural." "I know. It's not just that your bond with Rovek is flawed. There's another bond beneath it." Eryan went still. "Explain." "It's not visible to most. Not to council, not even to priests. But I've been keeper of the oath flame for 30 years. I've seen broken marks before." Her hand hovered just above Eryan's arm. "This one isn't broken. It's buried." Rovek stirred, groaning softly. Sivra's voice dropped. "Have you ever shared blood with another alpha before Rovek?" Eryan's heart kicked. "No," he said. Then, quieter, "Not that I remember." Sivra studied him. "Memory can be taken, but soul marks cannot lie." Rovek's eyes opened. He was awake enough to hear the last part. His voice was quiet, gutted. "You're not mine." The words hung in the air like frost. Eryan's gaze dropped to Rovek's hand, still trembling. "I never said I was." "Then what the fuck are we doing?" Rovek whispered. "This bond, this madness, it was supposed to mean something." Eryan's voice was low. "It does. Just not what you thought. You came into my halls, into my life, and for a moment I thought—" Rovek's throat worked. "I thought the fire chose us." Eryan took a breath. "I came here to survive, not to be chosen." Rovek's expression cracked. "You're someone's marked, maybe even someone dead. But it isn't me." Eryan didn't look away. "Then stop acting like I belong to you." Silence. Then Rovek turned his face to the side. Eryan left the room before the silence turned to begging. He didn't cry, but his hands shook as he descended into the lower chambers of Moonrest Hold, down to where the healing pools whispered with steam and silence. He sat at the edge, staring at his reflection. He didn't know who he saw anymore. Not Eryan Thayre. Not royal. Not wolf. Just wrong. A flicker moved behind his eyes. A name. Not his, but one that had once touched his soul, burned into it. Someone else had called him theirs. Someone whose voice was fire and frost, and familiar. Who had whispered his name like a promise. His hand clenched, and without thinking, he brought his wrist to his mouth and bit. Blood welled instantly, metallic and bitter. He let it flow, and with trembling fingers, he moved to where Rovek lay now unconscious again, the spirit fire having torn through his body too many times in one day. Eryan pressed his wrist to Rovek's mouth. "Drink," he whispered. "If I was made to destroy you, let it be now. If not." Rovek's lips parted, instinctive even in sleep. The blood flowed in, and then the burn began. But not from Rovek. From Eryan. A light flared at his collarbone. He ripped his shirt aside, and there, blooming across his skin like a second mouth, a second alpha vow mark. Old, faded, and unmistakably not Rovek's. Chapter 7: The Bond That Shouldn't Exist. The flames in Dreamer's forbidden archive burned blue. They flickered low against the obsidian lanterns, casting warped shadows on the cracked stone floor. This place smelled of old blood and older secrets. Salt-inked scrolls bound in wolf hide, stacked in labyrinthine columns that touched the arched ceiling like crooked spines. Eryan's hands hovered over the final scroll Sivra had brought him. She hadn't spoken a word since unlocking the iron seal. Her silence held weight, something reverent, or fearful. "This is from the old war," she finally said. "The records before the pact was broken. The experiments sanctioned under Hedrasane's first campaign." Eryan's throat was dry. "You think I was in this?" Sivra didn't look at him. "I think you were the reason they buried it." He unrolled the parchment. It wasn't a single name or a map or a war order. It was a ledger. No, an inventory. Lines upon lines of children, labeled not with birth years or kinline, but with resonance values. And beside one entry, scrawled in faded crimson ink, Subject A139. Ritual acceptable. Blood-bind latency unstable. Survival possible. Eryan stared at the number. His hand drifted to his ribs, where the second vow mark had begun to pulse faintly since his blood-fed Rovek. "Blood binds," he murmured, "but not fated, not true bonds." Sivra's voice cracked. "Weapons." Eryan's breath shuddered out. He wasn't a mate, not even a mistake. He was a vessel, a trap. Someone carved open and stuffed with stolen vows until one stuck long enough to use in war. His voice was thin. "How many others?" Sivra closed the scroll. "Only 2 survived. One went rogue in the eastern reaches. The other was reported dead 15 years ago." "Me?" "Yes." Eryan laughed, short, humorless. "Then what am I to Rovek?" Sivra met his eyes. "A mistake that fate keeps correcting." He stood, the library blurred at the edges, but he didn't sway. "Not yet. I need air." She didn't follow. He walked alone to the edge of the cliffs above Dreamer, Bonefire Crag, where wolves once burned the names of the dead into ash and sky. Now the crag was empty. Even the wind dared not howl. He stood at its edge and stared into the black. "I was a child," he whispered, not to anyone. He didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. "Not all children stay lost, little Oathfire." Eryan turned. Lucan Crown Dusk stepped from the fog like a shadow unfurled, tall, lean, dressed in the silver-threaded robes of a southern envoy. But his eyes, those were the same. From the memory he didn't want. From the nightmare he kept waking from, soaked in blood and vows. "You," Eryan breathed. Lucan smiled like a man who'd been waiting years to be recognized. "You wore another name then," Eryan said. "Theirs was a mask. Crown Dusk is mine." Eryan's fingers curled, readying the hidden blade in his belt. Lucan tilted his head. "You're remembering it, aren't you? The binding, the stone altar, the way your body shook but didn't break. You were glorious, Eryan. I was 10. And chosen," Lucan said. "Don't flatter yourself into thinking this was abuse. It was design. You were made to carry the imprint of any alpha, to mirror their vow. You survived the first trials. We thought you died." Eryan's voice cracked. "I did." Lucan took a step forward. Eryan didn't back away. "You belong to no one?" Lucan asked softly. "That's what you think?" "I know it." Lucan's smile twisted. "Then why does your mark still burn when I'm near?" Eryan went still. Lucan lifted a hand, and the air between them shimmered. A circle of old vow light bloomed between their chests, old and flickering but still pulsing with latent heat. "This is the bond one left in you," Lucan whispered. "Incomplete, cracked, but not gone. You think I'll let you finish it?" Eryan spat. "You have let me," Lucan murmured. "Every time you bleed, every time you touch fire, I feel it. Your soul still remembers mine." Eryan moved, fast. The blade was already in his hand, slicing the air. Lucan caught it with bare fingers. Their skin met, and the vow light flared. Not golden like Rovek's, but dark red, deep, wounded. It sang. Eryan cried out, wrenching back. The blade dropped. His knees hit the dirt. Lucan crouched, eyes glowing now with pure command. "You weren't made for love," he said almost gently. "You were made for war, and your time has come again." "I'm not yours," Eryan whispered. "I'm not anyone's." Lucan's smile vanished. "Then die without a name." The blade entered just below Eryan's ribs. He didn't scream. Lucan held him up as he twisted the dagger once. A graceful, almost ritualistic motion. Then he released him. Eryan fell, over the cliff's edge. The last thing he saw was the sky, empty and vast, and Lucan above, watching like a god too tired to blink. Wind tore past his face. Blood streamed from his side. And in his pocket, folded in a strip of waxed cloth, a signal spell sparked to life, ignited not by will, but by blood. Lucan's voice echoed behind him, carried by vow fire. Alpha's imprint reignited. The war key has returned. Then the rocks came up to meet him, and the world went dark. Chapter 8: The Wolf Who Chose to Bleed. The sky had turned white, not with snow but silence. Rovek awoke in it, not to pain, but to its absence. That hollow between heartbeats where feeling should be. The stillness before the scream. He didn't remember collapsing. Didn't remember Sivra's scream or the way Eryan's blood had touched his tongue like fire-milked iron. All he remembered was Eryan's face. The betrayal in it. The terror. The way his voice had broken on the word love without ever saying it. Rovek tried to rise. Something inside him ripped. A vow. No, not a vow. The vow. The one that should have burned golden when Eryan touched him. Should have sealed in sacred heat. But instead it had flickered, frayed, broken on the edges. A mark half claimed and never answered. He groaned. The sound was inhuman. Sivra's voice came from the blur. "You're awake. Thank the old gods." He turned toward her, eyes glowing too bright, his breath misting with unnatural steam. "You let him go." Her voice cracked. "He fell. Rovek, he fell from Bonefire Crag. We searched for hours, but the storm." "He didn't fall," Rovek growled, rising fully now, skin shimmering with the strain of the broken vow. "He was pushed." Sivra flinched. "By who?" "Lucan Crown Dusk." Rovek's voice trembled. "And I will burn this world until his bones confess it." Sivra looked like she wanted to stop him, but she didn't. She only offered a blade. "You don't need to fight this blind," she said. "There's a name. Hedra Sane. The one behind the old trials. The Queen of the South." Rovek's fingers closed around the hilt. The steel welcomed his fury. "Where is she now?" Sivra hesitated. "Lucan's report reached her this morning," she said. "He claimed Eryan's bond ignited again. That he is a completed vessel now. The South believes the blood key has awakened. They're moving toward Silverbone Gate." Rovek froze. That name, the ancient pass, guarded for centuries. The place where the veil between the spirit plane and flesh was thinnest. If they reached it with Eryan, if they poured vow fire into his veins, "He'll be consumed," Rovek whispered. "They'll break him from the inside." Sivra nodded. Rovek turned away. His blood felt wrong, like it didn't belong to him anymore. He needed to be clean. No, cleansed. Without waiting for her to follow, he ran. Through the frost-thick pines, through the breathless forest, until the shadows gave way to stone and steam. To the forbidden peak, the blood spring. No wolf went there unless they were ready to die. Because the spring took what you offered. And more. Rovek knelt at its edge. It didn't look like water. It pulsed, thick and dark, as if the land bled from the earth's wound. The legend said Alpha Kings once severed oaths here to end wars they couldn't win. Rovek unfastened his wrist guards. The marks still glowed, one from his line, one from Eryan. Both fractured, both unfinished. He lowered his hands into the spring. It burned, not on his skin, under it. The blood inside him began to scream. He saw Eryan in the scream. The way he smiled without meaning it. The way he begged to survive without asking for anyone's love. The way he said, "I came here to live, not to be yours." Rovek spoke aloud, throat shaking. "I don't want to own you." The vow marks began to split. "I don't want to fix you." The spring hissed, boiling around his wrists. "I only want you alive." He took the ceremonial blade from his belt, held it to the first mark, and whispered, "I sever this bond not in hate, but so I can walk through death unbound, until I find you again." Then he cut. Pain erupted, white and blinding, surging through his veins like wildfire. The vow mark burst into black ash. His breath failed. His heart stopped. The spring dragged him under, and still he held on. Somewhere above, Sivra screamed his name. But Rovek didn't die, because something answered the pain. Not love, not fate, something older and furious. Far to the south, beneath the obsidian banners of Hedrasane's war camp, the wind shifted. A soldier stood outside the command tent, watching the horizon. Then the call came. From the central tent, voices rose in one breath. "All kneel. He is waking." Inside, Eryan's eyes fluttered open. He didn't recognize the silks beneath him, the scent of crushed yew and bitter wine, the faint hum of old vow fire in the air. But he knew the eyes staring back at him. Lucan's, kneeling, and behind him, an entire army, their heads bowed, their voices unified. "Welcome, Blood Saint. Welcome, Son of the Flame." Eryan tried to rise, and felt the weight of 1,000 vows in his chest. He was no longer just a boy or a bond. He was a key, and every lock was beginning to open. Chapter 9, The Sanctuary That Hates Its Savior. The crown didn't weigh anything. That was the first thing Eryan noticed as the high attendant of the Southern Blood Sanctum placed it atop his head. No weight, no pressure, only heat, as if the metal were made not of gold, but of promise. A terrible, molten promise that singed the edges of his scalp. Not burning skin, but memory. Memory etched into blood. He didn't flinch. He didn't bow. But he didn't stop them either. Not when the robed priests knelt. Not when the queen raised her palm and called him sanctified. Not when they chanted the name he'd been given just hours ago. The Blood Saint. He didn't recognize it. But the worst part? It answered him. Eryan stood at the center of the sanctum, beneath a dome of bone-white stone. Veins of vow fire carved into its ancient marble ribs like capillaries of flame. He wore the crimson silk they gave him, tight at the throat, too loose at the wrists, as if stitched for a martyr. "Say something," Lucan whispered beside him, voice smooth as cut obsidian. Eryan didn't look at him. "Do I get to refuse?" he asked quietly. Lucan's lips twitched. "You already tried." He gestured subtly toward the sanctum floor, where vow markings had bloomed across the stone the moment Eryan touched it. Circular, sacred, irrevocable. "You stepped into legacy, Eryan," Lucan murmured, "and it recognized you. It's not mine." His voice cracked. "It was never supposed to be mine." "Then why does it obey?" Lucan said, all softness fading. "Why does the bone gate sing when your blood touches its roots? Why did the old fire, long dead, ignite when you breathed? Because something had been stolen." That was what Eryan felt, even if he couldn't name it. Something had been carved into him, not born, and now it claimed him as its origin. His fingers itched where the false oath still glowed beneath his skin. It hadn't faded, not even when he tried burning it, not even when he bled until his knees gave out. The more he fought it, the more real it became. Hedrasane descended the long steps of the sanctum's high dais, dressed not as a queen but a priestess, her veil of braided bones trailing behind her like a vow she never intended to sever. Her smile was gentle but ancient. "You have returned," she said, as if he were a season or a storm. "The gate has waited. The south has bled." Eryan's jaw clenched. "I didn't ask to be your savior." "No," she agreed. "But neither did the fire ask to be born in the dark. And yet it came." He turned away. Her eyes felt like scripture binding without consent. She let him go. That made it worse. Outside the sanctum, the long stairs to the silver-bone gate gleamed in the fading twilight, each stone etched with the names of wolves who had died waiting for a blood key that never came. And now they chanted his. Eryan gripped the stair rail until his knuckles burned. He wanted to scream, or tear the silk from his chest, or a voice cut through the chants. Rough, tired, scarred. "You never could run quietly." His heart stalled. Eryan spun around. Rovek stood at the edge of the terrace, a shadow cast long by the bloodlight, his armor broken, one shoulder wrapped in hastily bound bandages. His breath fogged from exhaustion, not cold. He looked like a wolf who'd carved through fire just to find him. And he had. Eryan didn't speak. He didn't trust what might come out. But Rovek stepped closer, one limp in his stride, one hand curled at his side. But his eyes, God's, his eyes still burned like they knew him. "Don't say it," Eryan choked out. "I didn't come here to say anything," Rovek said. "I came because I saw you fall. And then I saw what rose." Eryan's breath caught. "It's not me." Rovek stared at him, then dropped to one knee. Eryan's whole world stopped. "I don't care if you're the Bone Saint," Rovek said, "or the Fireless Key, or some weapon built to end us." His voice cracked. "I still see the boy who stood in my war room and asked why I let myself be cursed." He looked up, and this time his voice was soft. "I believe you weren't born for war." His hand lifted, open. "I believe you were born for me." Eryan couldn't breathe. He wanted to scream at him, to shove him off that beautiful lie. But Rovek was still kneeling. Not as an alpha, as a man who bled, who begged, who had burned his own vow just to have the right to reach for him again. Eryan took a step forward. Then, a scream tore across the sky. From the sanctum, Lucan, a soldier, stumbled onto the terrace, eyes wide, blood spraying from his throat. Behind him, footsteps, steel, panic. Eryan turned just as the sanctum doors burst open. Lucan emerged, crimson-soaked, Hedra's crown in one hand, her severed head in the other. The priest screamed. The soldiers cheered. Lucan's eyes found Eryan. He didn't kneel. He only smiled, and held the crown out like an offering of war. "The queen is dead," he said. "Long live the saint." Eryan staggered back. "No," he whispered. Lucan didn't hear him or pretended not to. "The gate is ready," he said. "All that's missing is a name." He threw the crown at Eryan's feet. "Yours." And the silver doors of the bone gate began to open. Chapter 10: The Alpha Who Let Go First. The bone-white mist had returned to Dreamer's borders. It coiled over the jagged stone like the breath of something ancient, something watching. The scent of burnt pine and blood lingered in the wind, and above the narrow path of the Wolfstone stairs, the silver-bone gate loomed, tall, sealed, veined with vow-fire lines that pulsed like arteries waiting for command. Rovek stood at its base, stripped of armor, bare-chested, arms streaked in his own blood. Behind him, the war drums had stopped. The soldiers waited in silence. Only the soul wolf moved, a translucent shadow at his side, woven from vow and pain. It was his, Rovek's soul-given form. Its eyes shimmered silver, its fur rippling with fading light. It had been with him since the day he first shifted. And now he was letting it go. "You'll only get one breath," Sivra warned behind him, voice raw. "One opening. No turning back." Rovek nodded. The soul wolf stepped forward. It didn't whine, didn't resist. It only looked at Rovek one last time. Then it walked toward the gate. The vow fire ignited instantly. The silverbone gate groaned and began to open. That's when Eryan screamed, "No, Rovek, stop!" He ran up the last stairs, breath breaking. His crimson robe soaked in the ash-flecked wind. Rovek turned, the gate behind him still parting. "You opened it," Eryan gasped. "You sacrificed for it." "It was the only way," Rovek said low. "I'm still here," Eryan cried. "I can still choose. I can stop Lucan. I'll burn the mark. I'll destroy the bloodline if I have to. But this war doesn't have to happen." Rovek's expression didn't shift. "You'll die if you destroy it," he said quietly. "You're linked to the gate now. You are the key. I don't care." Eryan stepped forward, tears brimming. "I don't want to be anyone's weapon. Not the South's. Not the Wolves'. Not even yours." His voice broke. "I don't want to be your destiny. I want to be your choice." A silence fell over them. Only the faint crackle of vow fire answered. Then Rovek stepped forward. He reached for Eryan's face, fingers rough, trembling, and he kissed him, not with fury, not with need, but with the grief of a promise already broken. Eryan's hands fisted in his chest. The kiss deepened, desperate. They didn't have time. They never had. "I wanted," Eryan choked. "Just one moment that was ours." Rovek touched his forehead to his. "I wanted that too." He pulled away. Eryan staggered, like a piece of him was being torn free. Rovek turned his back. "If you destroy the mark," Rovek said, voice ragged, "I will never come near you again. I'll honor that." Eryan's throat worked. "And if I don't?" Rovek didn't look back. "Then you were never free." He stepped through the gate. The vow fire flared, and the gap between them sealed in gold and ash. Eryan collapsed to his knees. The stone beneath him trembled. He wanted to follow. He wanted to run. But Rovek had meant it. Freedom came at the cost of being chosen. He reached into his robe, hand closing around the blade Lucan had once driven through him. He could end it here, one slice across the spirit vein. No more war, no more curse, no more him. He hesitated. And then, footsteps. From the treeline, Lucan emerged, slow, patient, cloak billowing. He crouched beside the patch of blood where Rovek had knelt to offer his soul wolf, and picked up the bloodstone Rovek had dropped. It still glowed faintly, the imprint of the Alpha's vow scorched deep inside. Lucan held it up, studying it. His lips curled. "I knew he'd leave it," he said. Eryan said nothing. Lucan turned to him, smiling. "Because he loved you too late." Chapter 11, The Throne Made of Blood. The South had always been warm. But tonight, beneath the shattered spires of its royal palace, the warmth was that of blood. It soaked the marble, painted the banners, and it glistened on the ivory throne where Hedrasane's crown still rested, cracked in two. The hall of binding was silent. Hundreds knelt in perfect symmetry, heads bowed, fists crossed over their chests in reverence. The oath fire torches burned blue, casting flickers of cold across the great arching dome above. Eryan stood in the center. He wore white. The ceremonial robe clung to his frame, silken, pristine, threaded with vow ink that shimmered faintly like chains. It wasn't armor. It was surrender dressed in reverence. A crown of woven silver bone rested on his brow, too large, too heavy, like a joke carved into something sacred. His hands were clean, but his mouth tasted like ash. Lucan stood just behind him, not in armor, but in black robes with his own blood mark etched over his heart, a crimson spiral surrounding the glyph of command. He leaned close, breath a whisper over Eryan's nape. "You look divine." "I look like a lie." Lucan smiled. "Divinity is always built on blood and lies. That's why it works." Eryan tried to speak again, but the chorus of voices echoed around them. "All hail the blood key. All hail the spirit sun. All hail the rebirth of the southern throne." The words slammed into him like stone. Lucan stepped forward, lifting one hand. The hall fell silent again. "My people," he said, voice rich and calm, "our queen has returned to the earth. Her crown lies broken. Her death was not in vain because her vision lives on in him." He turned toward Eryan. "Eryan Thayre, marked not by fate, but by sacrifice. He is the bond reborn, the key carved by ancient oath and sealed in fire. The war ends only when his blood sanctifies the gate. And until then, he shall reign in her name." Eryan's fingers curled into fists. "I never wanted this," he said softly. Lucan's gaze cut toward him, sharp and unreadable. "Wanting has nothing to do with it. I was supposed to be free." Lucan's voice dropped. "You are free. Freer than you've ever been. No one commands you, not even him." Eryan flinched. Rovek. His name wasn't spoken, but it laced every silence. Lucan circled him slowly. "You think that wolf would have let you go?" Lucan asked. "You think he meant it when he walked away?" "I saw him walk away," Eryan said, voice breaking. "Exactly," Lucan said. "And yet you still bleed for him." He stepped closer. "I've bled for you too. But I never walked away." Eryan tried to step back. The robes dragged behind him, heavy with embroidery that bound more than silk. Lucan caught his wrist, gently, reverently, like a lover. "You're trembling," Lucan murmured. "I hate seeing you afraid." "I'm not afraid of you," Eryan said, though his throat burned with unshed sobs. "I'm afraid of what you're making me become." Lucan's smile died. "I'm not making you anything. I'm protecting you." He stepped back and raised a gloved hand. A servant came forward, holding a small silver basin. Inside it, black ink shimmered, thicker than blood, older than magic. Spirit mark ink. Eryan staggered back a step. "No, it's only a bond," Lucan said. "To shield you, to keep them from using you again." "I don't want your shield." "Then you want his?" Lucan's voice snapped like a whip. "You want the alpha who left you with a war at your feet?" Eryan stared at the ink, pulsed softly, like it breathed. "I want someone to believe I'm enough without being used." Lucan's silence was thunderous. "You're not being used," he said finally. "You're being crowned." Eryan shook his head. "This crown is a cage." Lucan's fingers tightened. "Then let me chain you gently." He lifted Eryan's hand. The soldiers did not look up. Lucan took a silver needle from the basin. It glinted. "I need a drop, just one, to sanctify the oath." Eryan tried to pull away. Lucan's voice dropped low, a murmur in his ear. "Do you trust me?" "No." Lucan smiled sadly. "Good." He pricked Eryan's fingertip. The blood bloomed red on white. It dripped into the ink. The basin hissed. Then the ink shifted. It rippled, and a glyph rose from the center of the basin. Eryan gasped, because carved into that glyph, glowing in vow fire, was a name he hadn't spoken since Rovek turned away. Rovek Draelen. His true name. His soul-given vow name, hidden from all but the one who held his bond. Lucan had it. Had always had it. "I told you," Lucan said softly. "He didn't walk away to save you." Eryan's voice was a whisper. "He walked away so he wouldn't have to watch this." Chapter 12 The Wolf in Chains. The snow no longer whispered. It howled. Frostbane kept crouched on the edge of the northern spine, buried in a storm that never ceased, walls rimmed with ice, skies the color of bone. The once proud fortress was now a cage, silent and watching, a prison meant not to protect, but to forget. In its deepest hollow, Rovek Draelen knelt in the dark. His wrists bled where iron cuffs bit deep. His ankles, too. The runes carved into the manacles pulsed faintly, not to restrain strength, but to mute will. The scent of wolf clung faint and fading to his skin. He had not shifted in days. He no longer tried. The cell was made of quiet stone and cruel memory. Frost crept along the walls, whispering against his skin like ghosts. But nothing chilled him like the silence in his chest. The bond mark was gone. Not erased, severed. His own doing. His own blade. The echo of it haunted him more than pain ever could. A creak sounded at the end of the hall. Soft, deliberate. He did not lift his head. "I wondered," said a voice, rich and smooth, "if the beast of Draelen still breathes." Rovek said nothing. Bootsteps crossed the stone. No guards. No chains. She didn't need them. Sivra Halwyn stepped into the torchlight, her cloak white as the drifts outside, lined with woven fur. Her braids coiled like thorn vines over her shoulder, and the mark on her temple shimmered with the sigil of the High Tribunal. She stopped just beyond the bars. "I expected more rage," she mused. "You've come to mock me," Rovek rasped, voice dry. "Or end me." "Neither. I've come to give you a gift." He lifted his head then. The bruises along his jaw bloomed like violet ink, but his eyes still burned with the remains of gold fire. Sivra studied him for a moment. "Lucan Crown Dusk," she said. "You know the name." Rovek's lips curled into something too bitter to be a smile. "He has my mate. Of course I know it." Sivra tilted her head. "You don't know who he is." Rovek's silence was answer enough. She crouched, her hand brushing the bars. "Lucan is not just a usurper. He is your father's blood." The words cut deeper than the shackles. Rovek blinked. Sivra went on, voice quiet. "Your father swore 3 blood oaths. One of them was not to your mother. He sired a child in secret, bound by oath magic before you were born. That child was Lucan. He is not Alpha, but he was designed to control Alphas." Rovek shook his head slowly. "That's not possible. Spirit mark cannot be fabricated?" "Oh, but it can. And it was. You were taught that bloodlines determine fate, that strength is inherited, but strength is engineered. His mark is not divine. It's ancestral control. He is the oath system." Rovek's hands curled, the shackles groaning. "All my life," he said, voice raw, "I thought the mark made me who I was, that loyalty to the bloodline was loyalty to the pack." Sivra's eyes flickered. "Blood is not destiny. It's design." He looked down at his wrists, at the crusted blood, at the half-healed scars from where he had severed himself. "I thought I had broken free," he whispered, "but I was still inside the prison." Sivra's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "You were never the jailer, Rovek. Only the favored prisoner." He laughed then, hollow and sharp. "I thought killing the bond would save him. I thought if I stopped being Alpha, Eryan would be free to choose. And now he wears the white robe," Sivra murmured. "The one we used to wrap the sacrificial sons in, back before we called them kings. Rovek's head dropped forward, shoulders trembling. A sound escaped him, not a snarl, not a growl, but something that had no name. He did not weep for himself. He wept for the boy who had never been meant to rule, and yet had been placed on a throne of blood, all because he, Rovek, had walked away. "I left him in the fire," Rovek said hoarsely, "and called it mercy." The torchlight flickered. Sivra stood. "You are no longer bound by oath, but you are still bound by choice. What will you do with it?" "I'll burn," Rovek said. "If it brings him one breath of air, I'll burn." Sivra turned, her cloak trailing ice behind her. She did not say goodbye. She didn't need to, because the chains were already cracking. Not from muscle, not from will, but from echo. In the middle of the night, Rovek woke with a gasp. The cell was still, the torches dim, but a sound throbbed at the edge of hearing. A pulse, a name, Eryan. It wasn't spoken, it was felt. He felt the echo through his ribs, through the old scar at the center of his palm, through the broken mark on his wrist that still glowed faint as memory. He stood. The manacles groaned, then cracked, then shattered. He fell to his knees, gasping, as the bond mark briefly blazed again, only for a second, only long enough to remind him it still knew him. He pressed his hand to his chest. "I hear you," he whispered. "I hear you crying." And then he ran, through the frost, through the dark, through the past, southbound, toward the wolf in white. Chapter 13, The Mirror Between Them. The Hall of Mirrors was a place only whispered about, one of those ancient rooms the elders never named directly, as though speaking it aloud might awaken something inside. It stood deep beneath the southern palace ruins, half swallowed by time, rebuilt not from stone, but silver-veined obsidian and panes that shimmered without reflection. Eryan stepped inside with bare feet. The mirrored floor held no warmth, no scent, no echo, only the sensation of falling inward. Lucan's voice drifted behind him, amused. "It reveals the shape of a soul, not the lies worn on skin. If you're brave enough to look." He was already gone when Eryan turned. Eryan faced the center of the chamber. It pulsed faintly, each of the 12 great panels circling him like petals of some vast metallic bloom. The air buzzed low, like the hum of an old lullaby sung through bones. He approached one mirror, flat as a blade, twice his height. For a long moment it showed nothing. Then, not himself, not Rovek, but a wolf, black as eclipse, muzzle torn, breath ragged, and winged, or once winged. Where there should have been sleek arcs of power, there were only shattered bones, angles of ruin jutting from its back like broken promise. The wolf stared at him with gold glow eyes, dulling at the edges, and bowed its head. Eryan took a step back. "No," he whispered. "No, you're not." But the reflection trembled. His paws moved in rhythm with his breath. It was him, or worse, it was both of them, trapped in a mirrored loop of mutual ruin. He closed his eyes, and the world shifted. When he opened them again, it was night. The sky above him was bare, and he lay in a field of black wind and nothing else. A dream, or something deeper. He felt it before he saw it, a weight beside him. Warm, familiar. He turned. Rovek lay there in his wolf form, chest rising with effort, ribs exposed, scars glowing faintly with bond-mark lines that no longer reached completion. His fur was darker than before. Eryan reached out. His fingers touched the snout. Warm, solid, real. "You're hurt," he whispered. "Rovek, you're—" "I'm gone," Rovek murmured, but his mouth didn't move. The voice came from inside Eryan's head, threaded with dream logic and heartbreak. "No," Eryan said louder. "You're here. I can feel." You feel what's left. Rovek lifted his head, eyes burning gold, but his body shimmered with cracks like shattered glass beneath his fur. I asked you once to choose freedom, Rovek whispered. You didn't. I did. I chose to survive you. That was all I could do. Rovek stepped closer. Eryan felt his breath, sharp and clean and cold like mountain wind. Then choose again, Rovek said. Choose to end me. Eryan flinched. What? I can feel it, Rovek said, head bowed. The blood ink. The chains. Lucan's mark inside my name. I'm not whole anymore. And if I come back, I won't be yours. I'll be his. I'll destroy you. No, Eryan said, stumbling back. Don't say that. Don't ask me that. The wolf bared his teeth, not in threat, but agony. I don't want to hurt you, Eryan. Then don't leave me again. The dream trembled. The wind cracked. Eryan flung himself forward, arms wrapping around the wolf's neck. His tears soaked into the fur. I don't care if you're broken, he whispered. I don't care if you're ruined or cursed or a shell. I don't want the part of me that lived without you. For a moment the world stilled. The wolf nuzzled against his chest, shuddering, and then faded. The warmth, the scent, the shape, gone. Eryan woke alone. His fists clutched empty air. The silks beneath him were warm, the ceiling carved in golden spirals. He was still in the southern palace's royal chamber, draped in white, watched by silent guards in every shadow. Lucan stood at the balcony. When he turned, his expression was soft. Too soft. He's gone, Lucan said. Eryan's breath hitched. Lucan walked to him, crouching beside the bed. Rovek was executed at dawn, he said, for treason against the council. He refused the blood oath. They tore his soul from his body. What you felt was just residue. Eryan didn't move. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He only looked at the window, at the place where light never touched the frost, and whispered, You lie. Lucan's smile didn't falter. I saw the body myself. Eryan turned to him very slowly. Lucan reached to touch his hand. Eryan let him, for a moment, then drew it back. I understand, Lucan said gently. He was your tether. Now that he's gone, you'll need time. But you're still needed here. You are the binding symbol, the son of the old blood, the heart of the South. You belong to us now. Eryan looked at him, eyes too calm. Then you'll never have me. Lucan's smile faded. Eryan stood. The white robe flowed around him like fog. I will wear your chains. I will sit on your throne. I will let your soldiers kneel and your lords proclaim. But in the part of me that you cannot see, you will never touch me. Lucan's jaw clenched. He abandoned you. Eryan smiled, small, cold, burning. And still, he was mine. That night, the dream returned. But the wolf didn't speak. It stood before a mirror and stared at its reflection, then opened its jaws and bit through the chain wound around its own neck. Blood sprayed across the obsidian. The mirror cracked, and in the waking world, Lucan jerked upright in bed, gasping, clutching his arm. Across his forearm, red fractures burned through his skin like lightning bolts. Not from any wound, from within. The oath system had cracked. The wolf was coming home. Chapter 14, The War That Forgot Its Name. The sky over Ashvale was no longer gray. It bled. Clouds hung like torn fabric, stained crimson and rust. Ash fell in slow spirals, coating steel, fur, skin. The old northern ridge, the last breath of the highlands, lay shattered beneath the weight of siege towers bearing the southern sun emblem. And at the front of it all, a single white banner. Eryan Thayre's name, etched not by his will, but by Lucan's decree. The soldiers didn't know that. They marched with reverence, chanted his titles, painted his sigil on their foreheads in the black tar of broken oaths. The banner snapped in the wind above them, and Eryan stood beneath it in silence. He wore no armor, only the ceremonial threads of the binding suns, white robes stained with ash, a belt of woven silverleaf, and the collar Lucan had ordered, tight, luminous, burning with sigil marks. They called him the prophet who broke the alpha chain. He had broken nothing, only wept. He watched as battalions moved like insects across the valley, each step orchestrated by the priests behind him, chanting from their obsidian podium. With every word, the soldiers grew faster, stronger, and with every verse, something inside Eryan cracked further. Lucan approached from the shrine, steps sharp against scorched stone. "Your silence is too loud," he murmured. "The men need you to speak." Eryan didn't turn. "Do they?" Lucan's smile was thin. "They're not here for me. You are the blood heir of the first oath. Speak, and they'll believe the killing is holy. I never wanted this war." Lucan's eyes glittered. "And yet you're its face." The flames of the southern altar pulsed behind them, 12 pyres, each representing a broken pillar of the Alpha Order. Lucan had named them heresies. He'd promised purification. Eryan had heard the cries behind the fires. Whole northern villages reduced to dust because a child was born with unmarked blood. Lucan leaned closer, lips brushing Eryan's ear. "If you truly wish for no more bloodshed," he whispered, "then bless this war. End it before it truly begins." Eryan turned his head. His eyes were dry now, burned clean of grief. "You only want me to kiss the blade that's already inside me." Lucan straightened. "As you wish." He lifted a hand, and the sky answered. A flare of red sigil light erupted from the altar, lashing across the ashfield. It formed a dome over the front line, sealing the valley. A battlefield carved from fate. Then, the air changed. It shimmered like breath drawn too deep. The ash stirred, and from the northern hills wolves, black-armored, sparse in number, but in their center rode one whose presence split the veil. Rovek Draelen. Eryan's breath caught, knees softening. He wasn't sure what he saw first. The familiar curve of Rovek's jaw behind a half-helm, the scars lacing his throat where chains had once cut, or the eyes. Still gold, still defiant, but wrong. Rovek's horse stopped at the center of the dome. His eyes locked with Eryan's, and he didn't speak. He growled. Low. Warning. Controlled. Then he raised his blade. Eryan flinched back. "No. No, that's not." Lucan's voice curled around him like poison. "He's a rogue now. Your precious Alpha refused to bow. So I tied him another way." Eryan turned to him, horror blooming. What did you do?" Lucan smiled. "I carved a binding into his name itself. His soul is leashed to the command of the battlefield. He cannot disobey." "No! You said you wanted to end this. Do it. Give the order. Let him die with honor." Eryan's chest seized. He looked back. Rovek's sword rose. And then he charged. The field erupted. Chaos. Flames. Screams. Silver clashing against soul-marked bone. Eryan didn't move. He stood at the center, untouched, as both armies swirled around him, until Rovek reached him. His blade stopped inches from Eryan's throat. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Rovek trembled. His lips parted. But his hand didn't fall. Eryan raised his own, not to strike, to touch. His fingers brushed Rovek's cheek, dirt-streaked, blood warmed. "Do you remember?" Eryan whispered. "When you told me you would find me, even in a cage?" Rovek's hand shook. "Do you remember?" Eryan said again, louder now, voice cracking. "The mountain where we first kissed under moonless sky?" The sword clattered to the ground. Rovek collapsed to one knee and screamed, a howl, one of agony, not freedom. Eryan dropped with him. "I'm here," he whispered. "I never left." Rovek looked up, eyes wild. "You did. You left me. You let them take me. You. I was forced. You still let it happen." Silence. Then, "I remember," Rovek said, voice breaking. "I remember your mouth on my name. I remember you swore you'd burn this system down." Eryan held his face. "Then let me swear again." He stood, raised both hands high. Lucan shouted something behind him. Too late. The air cracked. From above, sigils ignited like falling stars. And then, one by one, the oath marks on every soldier's skin shattered. Priests screamed. Lucan backed away. Eryan's voice rang like a bell across the battlefield. "If the cost of peace is a god made of chains, then I unmake it." A circle of wind exploded outward from him, sweeping soldiers off their feet. The southern altar cracked. The silver collar around his throat shattered into light. Lucan bellowed, "No!" He grabbed a dagger from his belt, obsidian, carved with ancestral runes, and slashed it across Eryan's palm. Blood fell in thick lines onto the altar's central stone. The air froze. Eryan's breath caught as the ground beneath him shifted. From the center of the shrine, a black vine of oath light coiled upward, then split into dozens of tendrils, crawling across the battlefield like roots seeking hearts. Lucan's voice echoed through the sky. "I name this the war beyond Alpha, beyond Pack, beyond history." He turned, eyes alight. "With the blood of the prophet, I bind the future to my will." A final spark flared, and the sky turned red, not from blood, but from something deeper. The new chain had begun, and all Eryan could do was watch as Rovek was pulled back, away from him, eyes vacant again, dragged into the red haze of silence. The war paused, not in truce, but in death. Chapter 15, The Name That Unmade the World. The sanctum was not built. It was grown. Stone bent inward like bone shaped by prayer, and veins of silver oath light pulsed across its cathedral walls. The heart-forged sanctum, it was said, lay at the root of every vow spoken in the wolf realms. A seed of power, the echo of the first oath. Tonight, it pulsed to the rhythm of a stolen name. Eryan stood on the blood-marked dais, shackled by chains spun from ancient script, each link a sentence, each sentence a command. Lucan loomed above, one hand stained red from the binding knife. The other hovered over the obsidian altar, waiting. "You know what this is," Lucan said softly. "The world will not shift for your stubborn silence." Eryan's voice was raw. "You want the end, not peace." Lucan's eyes glowed with something beyond fury. "No, I want order. The chaos of free will has broken kingdoms, torn packs apart. But your name, your true name, will set all to balance again." He took a step forward. "I ask you one last time. Speak it." Eryan's lips remained sealed. His silence was a blade sharper than any vow. Lucan's jaw clenched. "Very well." He moved to the altar, spoke words that cracked through time. The chains around Eryan's wrists tightened. The sanctum groaned. Far above, the ceiling bled threads of oath light that twisted downward, wrapping Eryan's throat, his chest, his heart. The air grew still. Then, a scream split the silence. Not Eryan's. Sivra. She burst through the sanctum's ward, robes torn, blades blood-stained. Her hair, once silver-flecked, now streaked with soot. Her eyes caught Eryan's, and in them truth. "You can't let him finish," she cried. "He doesn't know what you are." Lucan snarled. "Stay back, Sivra." But she was already running. Her voice rang like a bell. "You were never meant to bear a vow, Eryan. You are the vows undoing. Eryan staggered. What? You were born from the final breath of the old gods, the last redemption mark. Your name wasn't made to bind, it was forged to unmake. That's why the chains break when you swear. That's why the system cracks when you cry. Lucan's eyes widened. No. Yes, Sivir said, defiant. You thought you could leech power from him, but you never understood what you held. His name is the end of all names. The oath light began to flicker. Lucan stepped back. Then, without warning, he raised a sigil-marked hand and hurled it toward Sivra. A whip of flame. She barely dodged. Traitor, he spat. You were mine. I was never yours. But even as her blades rose, Lucan was faster. He flung her into the stone pillar with a scream. She crumpled, motionless. No! Eryan surged forward, but the chains bit deeper. Lucan turned to him, breathing hard. Sweat beaded on his temple. Now, he said, before he arrives. But he was too late. The sanctum doors exploded. Rovek Draelen entered like a storm. Hair drenched in rain, eyes molten gold, cloak torn from the ride. His sword, jagged and ruined, was slick with blood not his own. Lucan froze. Eryan choked on his own breath. Rovek's voice was low, quiet, terrifying. Step away from him. Lucan bared his teeth. I should have killed you when I had the chance. You did, Rovek replied, walking down the steps. But I crawled out of that grave because he was still breathing. Lucan raised both arms. The chains around Eryan rose with him. Then die again. Spikes of red sigil light speared toward Rovek. He parried. 1, 2. But the third pierced his shoulder. He grunted, kept moving. Eryan shouted, Rovek, stop. He has the sanctum's core. He can use your bloodline. I don't care, Rovek growled. Eyes locked on Lucan. I'm not leaving without you. Lucan laughed. Then you'll both rot in the ruins. He drove his hand into the altar's heart, and the sanctum screamed. The chains struck Rovek through the chest, oath light searing into his flesh, coiling around his ribs. He staggered, collapsed to one knee. Blood pooled beneath him. Rovek! Eryan screamed. Lucan walked slowly to where Rovek knelt, coughing blood. He crouched. You could have ruled beside me, he said softly. You were strong enough, but you chose him. Rovek looked up, teeth stained red. I always did. Lucan drove the sigil deeper. Rovek's body arched. Eryan thrashed against the chains. Please stop. I'll do it. I'll speak it. Just stop. Lucan froze. He turned. Eryan's eyes glistened, glowing with something ancient. He exhaled once, and spoke. Vareth. A single word. But it wasn't just a name. It was a sound made of grief and fire, shaped in the throat of stars. It didn't echo, it consumed. Every vow etched into the sanctum burned red, then white, then gone. The altar cracked. The chains dissolved into ash. The walls began to scream. Lucan stumbled back. No, that's not possible. Eryan rose, unbound, hair lit with flame. His chest bore a sigil not carved by any hand, but born in the flesh, a spiral of gold and black. He walked to Rovek. Kneeling beside him, he cradled his face. Breathe, he whispered. Stay, please. Rovek coughed again. You said you'd never say it. I said I'd never say it for him. The sanctum around them was dying. The oath roots split, tearing the ground open. Every wolf across the world would feel it, every pack bond, every name-chained bond, every loyalty branded into skin. It all shook. Lucan shrieked. He lunged for Eryan, and vanished in a blast of white light. No scream, no trace, only silence. Eryan turned back to Rovek. His heart was still beating. but barely, and around them the world burned. "I'm sorry," Eryan whispered. "I should have saved you sooner." Rovek's hand lifted weakly. "You did." Then it dropped. The flames rose. Sivra crawled toward them from the edge of the dais, bleeding, whispering spells to hold the crumbling sanctum together. But Eryan didn't move. He held Rovek tighter, and wept. "If I have to destroy everything to bring you back," he whispered, pressing his forehead to Rovek's, "then the world doesn't deserve to exist." Everything went black. Only the breath of fire remained. Chapter 16: The Boy Who Burned His Name. The world had no sound, no light, only the echo of a name that shouldn't have been spoken. Eryan Thayre lay motionless at the broken heart of the sanctum. His body curled into the cracked stone like a discarded vow. His chest barely rose. Around him, the air shimmered, not with heat, but with memory. Ancient sigils floated above his skin, flickering and fading like stars collapsing in their own grief. The breath of the vow fire still lingered. The boy who had once borne 1,000 oaths now had none. Not even his own name. Rima stood at the edge of the sanctum ruins, robes torn and soaked in blood. Her face, once serene, was streaked with disbelief. "It's over," whispered one of the priests beside her. "No," Rima replied softly. "It's only begun." The earth cracked beneath them. From the broken altar, a shadow rose. Lucan crowned dusk. His robes were scorched, his left arm limp at his side, and blood painted the corners of his mouth. But his eyes burned brighter than ever, stripped of divinity, made pure by rage and revelation. He looked down at Eryan's crumpled form, and smiled. "You thought you could silence me with love," he said quietly. "But love was never your power. Your power was surrender." Rima stepped forward, trembling. "You can't take him again, Lucan. The sanctum's collapse, he's dying. Let him go." Lucan turned to her, lips curved in something that might have once been sorrow. "I am letting him go," he said, "but on my terms." He knelt beside Eryan's body, brushing a blood-matted strand of hair from the boy's cheek. There was no response, but Eryan breathed. Lucan laid a trembling hand over Eryan's heart, then whispered, "Vareth." A pulse of gray light surged from his fingers. Not vow fire. This was colder, older, a perversion of the oath system, a gray print, the ash of broken promises repurposed into something new, something crueler. The air bent, the bones of the altar hummed. All around them, the ruins began to move, stone reassembling itself into a grim monolith of jagged stairs and mirrored surfaces, like an altar built by grief instead of faith. Lucan's voice darkened. "I name this place the Pyre Spire," he intoned, "and from its flame shall rise the memory of the boy who bore us into salvation." "No," Rima said, horrified. "You're turning him into a myth." Lucan didn't answer her. He lifted Eryan's weightless form with both arms, cradling him like a martyr. The crowd of gathered soldiers and surviving priests parted as he ascended the reconstructed spire. Some watched with awe, others with fear, but none dared interrupt the madness of miracle. At the top of the spire, beneath the shivering sky, Lucan laid Eryan's body against the vertical altar stone, shaped now into a cross of obsidian and valmetal. Chains spun from ashlight snaked around the boy's wrists and ankles, binding him to the stone in a parody of worship. Eryan stirred, just once. His eyes opened only slightly, but enough to bleed a thread of silver light. Lucan leaned close, whispering against his temple. "Don't fight it, Eryan. Let me give you peace." Eryan's lips moved, a breath, no louder than the rustling of ash. "If you're still listening, I didn't give up on you, Rovek." Then his eyes rolled back, and the silver thread snapped. Lucan's hands trembled. He lowered his forehead to Eryan's, eyes fluttering closed. "I know," he whispered. "That's why I must make them love you more than you ever could have loved him." His lips brushed Eryan's forehead in a cold kiss. Reverent. Twisted. "Don't be afraid. I'll make sure the world remembers you." Then he stepped back, lifted his arm high, and called the final spark from the heart of the Vowfire remnants. A column of silver flame ignited at the base of the spire, climbing upward with a roar that shook the bones of every wolf in the bordering lands. Eryan's body did not burn. It glowed, lit from within like a star caught in flesh. The crowd fell to its knees. Priests wept. Soldiers stared in mute reverence. Rima, silent in her defiance, turned her gaze away and whispered to no one, "You should never have been a god, Eryan, only a boy who chose." And far away, beyond the war fronts, beyond the shattered packs, beyond the oath-broken valleys, Rovek Draelen stood alone beneath a storm-heavy sky. Mud clung to his boots, blood to his shirt, and a single pulse of light, silver and searing, tore across the horizon like a scream given form. His body froze. His lungs collapsed inward like something sacred had been stolen. Then, without understanding why, he fell to his knees, and from his eyes, 2 thin lines of blood slipped free. "I heard him die," he said aloud, voice barely human. "I heard him die." The wind didn't answer. Only the flames. Only the night. Only silence. Chapter 17: The Beast Without a Mate. The snow did not fall in marrow deep. It ached. It clawed sideways through the broken spines of trees, scoured the rocks until they wept rust, and drifted into the craters of old battlefields like ash mourning its own origin. There were no stars here, no names, no gods who listened, only the beast that refused to die. Rovek Draelen had not spoken in 7 days. Not with a voice, not with a mind, only with his breath turned to frost. Only with his claws, dragging trenches through the bones of the forgotten. Only with the howl that had shattered a mountain the moment he'd fallen to his knees and screamed Eryan's name into a world that did not answer. He had buried himself here, not in earth but in fury, and fury had no shape, no name, only a hunger. The remnants of Vowfire still clung to his skin like venom. His back was crisscrossed with self-carved sigils, half-broken attempts to undo the mark he had once worn with pride. The alpha crest on his chest was torn through. His human eyes were long gone. What stared from the pits of his skull now were feral. Silver burned to black. Pupil drowned in oath light. He was half wolf, half myth, and all mourning. Some called it madness. But this was not madness. This was mourning in its purest form. A sound broke the silence. A soft step. A familiar scent. Snow moss, moonroot, old ink. "Rovek," said Sivra Halwyn, voice low as the wind. "You're still breathing. That means you're still choosing." He didn't look at her. Didn't turn his head or blink. His shoulders rose once, like a volcano preparing to crack. Sivra stepped closer. Her boots sank into the frozen moss, cracking thin ice. Her eyes swept the hollow. She had found him in the pit of bones, the grave of oathbreakers, where vow beasts came to gnaw on the guilt of long-dead men. He had made this place his den. "You think pain makes you loyal," she said. "You think if you hurt enough, you'll be able to follow him into whatever burning grave he's been thrown into." Still no answer. "You can't," she whispered. "He's gone." That made something in Rovek stir. Not move, but shudder. Sivra watched the slow turn of his neck, the way his jaw flexed, as if chewing on grief too heavy to swallow. Then, finally, he spoke. "He's not." His voice was deeper now, rougher, like it had been dragged across stone. as if his wolf had been speaking alone for days and only now remembered it once belonged to a man. Sivra's jaw clenched. I saw the spire burn. The vow fire took him. You know what that means? No, Rovek growled. I know what Lucan wants it to mean. You're losing yourself. I want to lose myself. Sivra flinched. He rose. Emotion too fluid to be human. Too silent to be just a wolf. His form shifted without warning. Bones reshaping mid-breath. Shoulders cracking wider. Fur erupting from his spine like night-given flesh. His wolf was no longer the sleek black beast that once ran beside Eryan's softer footsteps. This was something else. A creature of scars and vow rot, of searing eyes and clawed truths. A vow eater. Rovek's eyes glowed in the gloom. If he thought dying would stop me, he whispered, voice split between man and monster, then he never understood what it meant to be mine. Sivra swallowed. You'll burn the whole world trying to find a shadow. Then I'll walk the ashes. His chest rose, and breath steamed in the cold. He was the last thing that kept me human, and he died thinking I'd live. Rovek. I won't. He stepped toward her, not menacing but final. You should leave, Sivra, before I forget who you are. There was a silence. She didn't move. Then softly, she said, if you let it finish the shift, if you bury your soul completely, there's no coming back. I know. You'll become a deathless thing. No name, no form, just a beast. His reply was a whisper of steel. Good. She trembled. Is that what Eryan would have wanted? Rovek's jaw clenched. He turned from her, and without another word, walked to the edge of the pit, where shards of broken vow stones still glimmered faintly in the dirt. He knelt there, let the jagged edges cut into his palms. Let the silence fill his throat like chains. Sivra watched. Then I'll stay, she said, until you disappear completely. But Rovek didn't respond. He curled into the bones, wrapped himself in silence, and let the shift continue. Bit by bit, his human self burned away. His heartbeat slowed. His voice vanished. Only the wolf remained, huge, scarred, and unspeaking, the beast without a mate. And for a time the world forgot his name. But the wind remembered. And one night, as snow sliced sideways across the hollow, and wolves howled distant in the marrow deep dark, a single voice whispered through the ash, come back. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even real. But it was his. Rovek's eyes snapped open, and deep inside their monstrous glow, a flicker of vow fire pulsed. A memory, a soul, a spark, and the beast, once without hope, breathed. Chapter 18 The Saint in a Glass Prison. Light did not touch the reflectory. It was trapped like everything else inside. 1,000 mirrors lined the chamber's walls, their frames made of silver bone and vowwood, their faces burnished with spellglass so fine it shimmered between reality and dream. They reflected nothing of the world outside. Only him. Eryan floated in the center of it all. Not dead, not alive, just held. His body was translucent now, not quite flesh, not quite mist. His feet hovered inches above the floor of the reliquary, a slab of crystal etched with prayer lines and old gods' names. Thin cords of light ran from his chest into the ceiling, twitching in time with a heartbeat that wasn't his. A red pulse, a rhythm fed not by his blood, but someone else's. Lucan's. Still so beautiful, came the voice, soft and awful in its tenderness. Lucan stood at the altar, his palm cut open, dripping fresh blood into a silver basin. The reliquary drank it greedily. The cords connecting to Eryan shimmered brighter. His body glowed faintly within the mirrored walls, like a sanctified icon, a saint preserved in suffering. Lucan lifted his gaze. You were always meant to be seen, he said. Even when you didn't want it. Eryan did not move. His eyes were half-lidded, lips parted slightly in breathless stillness. He did not see Lucan. He saw very little anymore. But inside, somewhere past the haze and sleep and soft burning light, a whisper stirred. Don't forget. The mirrors whispered too. They echoed Lucan's thoughts before he could even speak them aloud. He tried to bury you in death, but I brought you back. He tried to mark you as his. I made you divine. I don't ask for your love, Lucan whispered, stepping forward. His fingers trailed across the glass. Just your silence. Just your stillness. Eryan blinked once. A slow, flickering motion. He had forgotten his name. He had forgotten how to summon flame, how to speak old words, how to shift from shadow to skin. His soul had been carved down into a single offering. Be seen. Be pure. Be holy. He no longer remembered why the idea made him ache. Except when the kiss came. Not from Lucan. Never from Lucan. But from the memory burned somewhere into the shape of him. Lips against his throat. Not gentle, but desperate. A hand pressed to his spine. Claws trembling with restraint. A voice, ragged with grief. You don't have to be anything. Just be mine. Eryan's breath hitched. Lucan saw it. His pupils narrowed, smile faltering. No, Lucan said softly. Not him. Not again. He pressed his palm to the glass, fresh blood smearing the surface. The reliquary pulsed, and the cords around Eryan's chest tightened. Magic surged, sacred and cruel, and the glass walls shimmered with new wards. You were made to end the old gods, Lucan hissed. But I made you into one. I kept you safe. I gave you the only kind of immortality that matters. Remembrance. The mirrors vibrated. Reflected angles of Eryan's form began to shimmer, multiply. His image stamped 1,000 times into the chamber. It was devotion and desecration all at once. And still Eryan didn't look at him. He looked somewhere else. Lucan stepped back, shaking. I bound you with a blood promise. My heart, for your soul. A long silence. Then, from inside the glass, something cracked. Lucan froze. The sound was too soft at first, like a sigh. But then it deepened, sharpened. The vibration of rage and memory shouting through a cage of mirrored lies. The reflection of Eryan moved. Not the body in the center, but the mirrored image behind Lucan. A phantom echo. It wasn't passive. It was screaming. Rovek's face, contorted with pain and fury, smashed across the surface of one mirror like a firestorm. Lucan turned too late. The glass shattered. One corner of the reliquary split wide, silver lines searing like lightning through the spell glass. Light burst from the crack. A sound escaped from Eryan's throat, small, broken, but real. Lucan reeled. No, 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 he's gone, Lucan rasped. He can't reach you here. The whisper came again, this time from everywhere. Rovek. It wasn't Eryan speaking. It was the vow fire within him. It remembered, and it called. Lucan backed away, eyes wide with something like horror. He grabbed the edge of the altar, pressing his bleeding hand harder into the basin to feed the wards. You can't leave me, he hissed. I'm the only one who stayed. I'm the only one who chose you over fate. The mirror crack spread. Hairline at first, then splintering like frost across glass. And from the void between the shards, something breathed back. He hears you. He's coming. Lucan turned toward the sound. His voice, no longer calm, rasped into the air. Someone is waking him up, and far away, beyond the chamber, beyond the mountains and blood and vow-burned soil, a beast stirred, a name breathed back into flame, and the prison of glass began to remember what freedom sounded like. Chapter 19 The Path of the Bone Wolves. The scent of the dead was not rot. It was ash and memory. Rovek stepped into the depths of Marrow Deep with no light to guide him. His boots crunched over salt, brittle bones and the remnants of old howls. The walls narrowed as he descended, the earth pressing in like teeth, the weight of centuries exhaling in every breath he took. Sivra followed only so far. Beyond this point, she warned, voice barely a whisper in the stale air, you walk alone. Even spirits aren't brave enough to follow. Rovek didn't turn back. Alone was what he had become. He passed under a vault shaped like a broken ribcage. Wolves carved from obsidian lined the path, mouths open in warning or welcome. It was hard to tell. This was not a tomb. It was a trial. The path of the bone wolves, where only those mad with grief or glory dared tread. He was both. The marrow stone beneath his feet pulsed faintly as he stepped. Some magic remained in these cursed halls. Old vow blood, old hunger. Rovek let his hand graze the curved wall as he passed. A whisper clung to his fingers like frost. What would you trade for the soul you lost? I already traded myself, he answered into the dark. Further in, he found the gate. It wasn't a door, but a maw, a mouth shaped of tangled bones. Wolf-shaped skulls locked in a permanent snarl. No key, only blood. Rovek bit into his palm. His blood hissed when it touched the threshold. The bone gate screamed as it opened. Beyond it, the chamber of judgment waited. They came without sound. The bone wolves. Dozens, no hundreds, of skeletal beasts emerged from the shadows. Some still wore scraps of ancient armor. Others had ceremonial vow sigils carved into their ribcages. All of them stared at him with hollow sockets aflame with blue fire. They circled him. Their silence was not empty. It was accusation. You seek the chain of return, the largest among them said. Its voice was not spoken aloud, but pressed directly into his thoughts. You seek to steal a soul from the gods. I seek to return what was taken unjustly. Even if he no longer remembers you? Rovek's jaw tightened. Yes. You would drag a saint from peace into torment? He never had peace, Rovek growled. Not once. Not when he lived. Not when he died. The flames in the wolf's eyes flickered. You would bring him back for yourself. No, Rovek said quietly. For him. Even if he never looks at me again. Even if his soul hates me for it. A pause. Then the voices came all at once. Every wolf, snarling through him. And are you worthy? Rovek staggered, clutching his chest. It felt as if 1,000 claws raked through his ribcage, tearing through the layers of guilt, failure, want. Images slammed into him. Eryan screaming in the reliquary. Eryan's voice whispering, I didn't give up on you. Eryan, burning like a god while Rovek bled into the dirt too slow to save him. The bone wolves circled tighter. They chanted now. Show us what you would become to unmake death. Rovek sank to his knees. Blood ran from his nose. His skin burned. He felt the wolf in him thrashing, howling, starving. He could let it take over. He wanted it to. And yet, beneath it all, something else rose. Not hunger, but vow. He pressed his bloodied hand into the bone floor and roared, I will become a monster if I must. The wolves stilled. I will crawl through every hell the gods have buried. I will let this flesh rot. I will let this soul splinter. But I will not let his name be forgotten. The flames in their eyes flared blue. I don't care if he remembers me. The bones began to vibrate. I only care. Rovek's voice broke. Rough, feral, human. That somewhere, something in him still hears me howl. A hush, then a sound like thunder rolling through a tomb. The largest bone wolf stepped forward. The skull bowed. "You are cursed," it said, "and chosen." The others parted. From the center of the chamber, rising on a stone altar of crushed vows, a relic emerged. A necklace of charred bone segments, each one carved with a sigil for return, for memory, for love refused. The chain of return. The bone wolf intoned, "Take it, burn for it, and know, when he rises, you will not be the same man he died for." Rovek stood. He took the chain. It hissed the moment it touched his skin, searing marks into his collarbone. Vow fire licked up his spine. Blue flames shimmered in his eyes. And as he turned, a whisper like smoke followed him out of the tomb. "Then bring him back, Oathbreaker, or die trying." Far away, in a chamber of glass and silence, a mirror exploded. Lucan's breath caught as shards rained to the floor, glowing with faint blue fire. He stared at the fragments, unblinking. "No," he whispered. But the vow had already been made, and Rovek Draelen no longer walked as a man. He walked as fate's reckoning. Chapter 20: The Alpha Who Dared the Gods. The mirror chamber breathed, not with air, but with light, cold, pulsing, sentient. Columns of obsidian glass rose like frozen lightning bolts, their surfaces rippling with soulfire. In the center stood a dais carved from vow stone, wrapped in silver filigree and blood runes. Lucan stood at its edge. He looked like something reborn in silence, robes black as confession, skin whiter than salt, lips stained with ceremonial ink. His fingers hovered over the sealed glass reliquary, the prison that held Eryan Thayre's flickering soul. The chains that circled it were not metal. They were oaths, wound into form, humming with ancient restraint. He leaned in, voice low, reverent. "Wake up, my saint." Inside the reliquary, the shimmer thickened. The figure curled within was still too faint to see clearly, barely more than light in a humanoid shape, but it shifted. The echo of breath touched the glass. A trembling, a name whispered without sound. Lucan smiled. "You heard me." Rima stood to his side, her own ceremonial mask glittering with mirrored tears. "He's responding more often, but the soul's cohesion is fraying." "Then we act now," Lucan murmured, "before memory overtakes faith." He turned. All around the chamber, the old vow council had gathered, elders wrapped in shrouds, their wolf marks long since burned away in the final schism. One by one they knelt. Lucan raised his hand. "Today we shed the old system. No more blood oaths, no more soul burns, no more alpha vow brands. Today we build a new god." He turned back toward the reliquary. From his ashes, Eryan stirred. His form shivered within the mirror-locked glass, and for the first time, his lips parted. "I remember." Lucan stepped forward, voice velvet in calm. "You remember your duty, your name, but the name that tried to form wasn't his. It was Rovek, and in the mirrored walls surrounding him, one cracked. Just a hairline fracture." Lucan's smile twitched. He pressed a hand against the reliquary and let his blood seep through his palm. The chain around the glass pulsed, then flared, knitting the crack with glowing threads. Eryan's eyes fluttered. "No, I saw him," he called. Lucan leaned in, nose almost to the glass, tone low and steady. "There is no he. That was the echo of your pain. Not truth. Not memory." Eryan's fingers ghosted upward from within, pressing against the invisible wall of the prison. His voice. Lucan's expression softened with something dangerous. "Let me help you forget." He stepped back and motioned to Rima. The high priestess placed a gleaming circlet into his palm, vow steel shaped like a crown, forged with mirror shards. At its center, a single drop of Eryan's blood crystallized. Lucan held it above the reliquary. In ancient rite, he said slowly, we bind soul to soul, not as mates, not as wolves, but as vessels, as divine continuity. Eryan's breath caught. What is that? Lucan smiled. A mirror wedlock, a soul marriage, the only path through which you can be reborn in full. No, Eryan whispered, recoiling. Lucan's voice dipped into something gentler, but colder. You've already died for them. Let this be your second life, for all of us. For a world without pain. No more bonds. No more burned names. Just you. Eternal. Eryan's throat bobbed. I don't want to belong to anyone, he rasped. Lucan's smile turned sad. Then belong to the vow. To the gods. Eryan shut his eyes. He could feel the chains of spirit tightening. The air around him swelled with sacred power, but also with something else, loneliness so vast it felt like holiness. Lucan wasn't asking for love. He was asking for surrender, for compliance, for divinity restructured in his image. And yet, in the space where his memories frayed, one thing pulsed like blood, hands on his face, warm, rough, reverent, the scrape of a voice, low and furious and trembling. Don't you dare die without me. He opened his eyes. Rovek, he whispered. Lucan's entire body went still. The room dimmed. The reliquary's glow flickered. Then the mirrors began to hum. Just outside the south wall of the chamber, hidden behind a spell-woven veil, a storm of soulfire coiled. Rovek stood with the bone chain clutched in his hand, vow fire curling around his fingers, etching red cracks into his arms and neck. He looked like a creature unchained, cloak torn, eyes alight, jaw set in raw fury and grief. He pressed a palm to the mirror wall. Eryan! The soul in the reliquary froze. Eryan's mouth opened slowly. You! And then the mirrors screamed. The wall between them fractured in a spiderweb bloom, mirror glass splintering like veins of frozen blood. Inside the reliquary, Eryan's form shimmered, wild, erratic, like memory trying to crawl out of godhood. His fingers began to twitch. The chain seals groaned. Lucan staggered back. No, he hissed. He's not ready. He'll destroy himself. Rima reached for the crown, panic in her eyes. Seal him again. But Eryan's eyes snapped open, and for the first time since his soul was trapped, they burned with will. His hand struck the inside of the glass. Cracked. Outside, Rovek stepped forward, pressing the bone chain to the mirror's edge. His voice was hoarse. I don't care if you remember me. His forehead touched the glass. I just want you to come back. And then, from the mirrored reliquary's heart, a single shard flew outward and struck the dais. The chamber shook. Lucan fell to one knee, hands dripping blood. Eryan's voice filled the room, not loud, but clear. I don't want to be your god. Lucan looked up, face unreadable. You already are. He rose slowly, extending the vow crown toward the glass. If you won't return as mine, then return as theirs. Let me sanctify you. Let your name become immortal. But this time Eryan did not flinch. He looked straight through the glass, at Rovek, and in the space between them, where no god should dare exist, a bond pulsed. Fractured, burning, unbroken. Lucan's hand trembled. Outside, Rovek exhaled. I'm here. And for the first time since the altar fire, Eryan smiled. Only a little, only enough. The reliquary exploded. Mirror shards screamed across the chamber, tearing through wards, slicing through the old vow sigils that bound the air. Lucan threw his arm up, blood shielding him barely in time. Rima screamed, retreating into shadows. When the smoke cleared, the dais was empty. The reliquary was shattered. Only one thing remained. A single handprint, scorched into the mirrorstone floor. And far outside, down in the spiral hall that twisted toward the heart of the Vow Palace, Rovek knelt, catching the faintest echo of breath on the wind. "Wait for me," Eryan whispered. "I'm coming back." The bond ignited. The gods were watching, and the Alpha who dared them smiled. Chapter 21 The Vow Bride. The bells tolled like mourning doves. Each chime rang out across the valley, shivering through glass, striking the mirror spires of Crown Dusk's southern sanctum. The sky above the vow spire shimmered with consecrated light, crafted not from sun, but from blood-forged spellglass that filtered divinity into something sharp enough to bind a soul. The wedding had begun. Inside the sanctum's hollow heart, the altar gleamed like a blade unsheathed. Rima moved silently across the polished obsidian, her robes rippling with mirrored veils. A trail of vow ink followed in her wake, symbols that flickered between ancient wolf script and the new divine language Lucan had crafted for this singular purpose. "Has he awakened?" she asked. Lucan stood still beneath the tower's central beam, eyes fixed on the mirrored vault above. His hands were bloodless around the crown he held, mirror steel shaped in a circlet, thorned and gleaming, meant for no mortal brow. "He doesn't need to awaken," he murmured. "He only needs to accept." Rima paused. "He may resist." Lucan turned slowly. "No," he said, "not anymore." At the far end of the sanctum, silver doors opened. An Eryan stepped through. No, floated, more like. Two vow servants guided him gently, their hands never quite touching, as if afraid the soul within him might slip loose. His body was draped in sacred robes of white and silver, the train long enough to catch the breath of light beneath his feet. His hair had been washed in ritual salt, his skin painted with pale runes. But it was his eyes that made the room still. They were open, but vacant. No fear, no hate, no recognition. Just the stillness of something half alive, half sacrificed. Lucan's throat tightened. Eryan looked like a prayer made flesh. And for a moment, just a moment, Lucan almost bowed. He stepped forward instead. "You look beautiful." Eryan didn't respond. Lucan gently reached up, tucking a lock of hair behind his ear. "Do you know why you're here?" The boy blinked. A slow, dazed motion. "To become yours." The voice was barely a whisper. Lucan smiled. "Yes." Rima raised the sanctum staff, and the light above dimmed. "The rite of the vow bride begins," she intoned. "Let the god-child step forward. Let the anchor bind. Let the vow consume." A hush fell across the watchers, robed counselors, silent priests, and golden-armored vow guards standing in precise formation. Among them, unseen, hidden behind a mirrored helm and ceremonial cloak, Rovek stood, his fingers clenched around the hilt of a vow guard blade. He didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. He watched, as Eryan was led to the altar, as Lucan raised the crown above his head, as vow fire lit along the altar's edges, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. "Repeat after me," Lucan said softly, gaze never leaving Eryan's face. "With this vow I bind thee." Eryan's lips parted. "With this vow, I make you the divine heart of every oath ever spoken. Divine heart, I forsake the gods. I make you mine." The pause was longer this time. Then, "I make you mine." Lucan stepped closer. Their foreheads touched. In vow and soul. In name and eternity. In vow and soul. Eryan's hands trembled. Lucan held them. And for one moment, one fragile second in the world, Eryan blinked, and a single tear slipped from his left eye. Lucan caught it with his thumb. His voice was almost broken. "Why do you cry?" Eryan's lips moved, barely sound. "Why does it hurt?" Like something was torn from me? Lucan's face crumpled. He pressed a kiss to Eryan's brow. Because your soul still remembers what it needs to forget. He cupped Eryan's face, tilting it toward him. But I will take that pain from you. I will make you clean. Whole. Mine. Their lips touched, not with passion, with claim. Lucan kissed him like a priest anointing a relic, like a lover gripping a dream, like a god swallowing a star. Eryan did not flinch, but the altar groaned. Below, Rovek saw it. The vow fire flared blue for half a second. The reflection of Eryan's tear shimmered across the mirrored wall, and something inside Rovek snapped. He clenched the bone chain beneath his cloak. You're not his godchild, he whispered. You're not a vessel. You're not a symbol. The words barely passed his lips. You're mine. At the altar, Rima stepped forward with the final relic, a silver blade etched with vow lines, meant to seal the binding with a cut on both their palms. She handed it to Lucan. Complete the bond. Lucan lifted the blade, and for the first time, Eryan stepped back. Just one half step. Just enough. Lucan stilled. Eryan? The boy's breath was shallow. I heard something. Lucan turned his head. Nothing can reach you here. You are sacred. You are above. No, Eryan whispered. His fingers drifted to his chest. It came from below. Lucan moved to steady him. It was a trick. Your soul is still healing. Let me. But Eryan looked up, and his gaze, vacant just moments ago, now shimmered with something else. Something feral. Something familiar. He flinched from Lucan's touch, and all across the altar the glass trembled. One of the vow mirrors cracked. Just slightly. Rima gasped. Lucan turned, fury rising behind his mask of calm. Seal the chamber. But it was too late. Rovek had moved. One step from the line of guards. Another. Then he threw off the mirrored helm. And time stopped. Lucan's pupils shrank. Eryan's eyes widened. Rovek, he breathed. The name struck like a blade through silence. Guards rushed forward. But Rovek was already at the base of the altar, bone chain blazing in his hand, his vow mark roaring back to life across his chest. He looked up at the boy in white, and the boy looked down. Eyes no longer empty, eyes that remembered, even if they didn't understand, even if they couldn't name it. Lucan raised the dagger, desperate now. He's not yours. He's not yours either, Rovek growled. Then he flung the bone chain forward. It struck the base of the altar. The vow fire exploded in reverse, sucking in, not out, tearing open the woven oaths that tethered soul to sanctity. Lucan screamed. Eryan fell, right into Rovek's arms. The chamber shook. Mirrors shattered. The light above dimmed like a dying star. All around them chaos bloomed. But Eryan clutched Rovek's robes with fingers that finally felt again, and whispered, "You came." Rovek's throat tightened. "I always do." Then the Vowguard surged, and blood fell like prayer beads. Chapter 22. The Ghost Who Wore His Face. The mask smelled like blood and incense. Rovek adjusted the mirrored helm over his face, the etched silver pressing against his brow like a second skull. The Vowguard armor clung too tightly at the shoulders. Lucan's men were leaner, obedient, easier to gut and fold than fight. He could feel their scent still lingering in the joints of the cloak, all ashes and sanctified sweat. He'd killed one in the eastern stairwell, another near the Vowmirror vault. Neither screamed. Now, he walked among the living as a shadow, one step at a time down the winding spiral of Vowsteel stairs, past chanting priests with black-inked mouths, past the veiled soulwrights who whispered to pulsing glass walls. Down, down, past the bones of forgotten wolves sealed into the foundation, until he reached the root, The chamber bloomed beneath him like a wound, open and pulsing. Here, in the deep marrow of the mirror sanctum, the very essence of the vow system pulsed in a living lattice of blood and oath, thick crimson roots rising like tendrils from the stone, each marked with sigils and glowing with life-light. They twisted into the heart of the sanctum's source, a suspended sphere of molten vow glass, cradled in bone frames and runic anchors. The core. Rovek stopped at the edge of the platform, sweat beading beneath the helm. In the heart of that sphere he saw him, Eryan. His body was curled in fetal stillness within the red-lit glass, half dissolved into the network of roots that wrapped around his chest, his spine, his throat. His eyes were closed, lips parted in silent breath, and around him, dozens of priests, the soul rites, their faces hidden behind bone-white masks, their chants crawling over the walls like moths. Their hands moved in synchronized gestures, tethered to blood threads that slithered from their veins into the root lines. Rovek's grip on the bone chain tightened. He dreamed of this moment, but never like this. Phase stability remains within threshold, one of the masked priests said. Soul suturing complete. Vow matrix accepting core consciousness. Another nodded. Subject response minimal. Cognitive bleed negligible. He is no longer subject, a third intoned. He is centerpiece. Rovek stepped forward. Orders from Lucan, he growled, mimicking the clipped tone of the guards. He wishes for a reverence test. Soul recognition under distress. The priest stilled. One turned. The rites are not yet ready. He insists. Rovek snapped. Would you have him descend himself? A long pause. Then the priests bowed. He may approach the chamber. The locks hissed. The bone-laced gate creaked open, releasing the stink of molten vow glass and spiritual degradation. Rovek stepped in. Each breath scraped his lungs like powdered glass. He approached the core, and when he reached it, close enough to see Eryan's closed lashes, the faint flicker of his heartbeat in the roots around his throat. He reached beneath his cloak and drew the bone chain. It pulsed, faint blue fire kindling along its links, resonating with the fragments of vow still echoing in Eryan's soul. Rovek pressed the chain to the glass. Eryan, he whispered. It's me. The glass shimmered. Cracks of light flickered through it. Eryan stirred. His head turned, slowly, sluggishly, as if breaking through molasses. Then, his eyes opened, and Rovek's heart seized. Blue. Still the same impossibly bright, ice-clear blue, but layered now with veils, like looking through frost and fire and old mirrors. The boy within the sphere blinked slowly. Recognition flickered, then vanished. You again. The voice was not sleepy. It was cold. Lucan sends new ghosts each time, Eryan said flatly. Always with your face. Rovek froze. No, he said. The boy's lips curled faintly. You scream less than the last one. Eryan, you think I can't tell illusion from memory? You think he wouldn't build 1,000 phantoms from my longing and bury me in them? I'm not. You're not real. The rejection landed like a knife. Rovek slammed a fist against the glass. You think he'd send me to torment you? You think Lucan would wear my face? Eryan looked away. Tell me, ghost, what did I whisper to you when you bled on my hands in the forest the night we swore our first oath? Rovek stepped closer, every breath trembling. You said, his voice cracked. You said, don't die. Even if you leave me, I'll find you again. I'll remember you even if you forget me first. Eryan flinched, ever so slightly, but his voice stayed cold. All ghosts know the script. Rovek couldn't breathe. He pressed both palms against the glass now, bone chain pulsing harder, licking blue up the core. I burned the north looking for you. I carved through temples and clawed through sanctums. I drowned my name in blood and ink and darkness, and I never stopped dreaming of the way they nailed you to that altar. The words tore out of him like glass. You forgot me, he choked. But I watched you die every night. Inside the core, Eryan's hands trembled. His voice came soft now. Then let me die, ghost. Stop trying to drag me back. No. Rovek pressed the chain harder. And for one flicker of breath, the blue light sparked deep in Eryan's chest. His pupils dilated. Recognition, real, raw, flashed. And he whispered, Rovek. Rovek gasped. Yes. Then the vow roots tightened. Eryan screamed. The light vanished. His spine arched against the tethering vines as blood seared through the markings on his skin. A ring of ancient vow script lit around his throat. Obedience. Oath. Silence. The priest surged forward. Alarms flared crimson through the chamber. He's breaking pattern fidelity. Shut it down. Purge the anomaly. Rovek drew his dagger in one clean movement. He spun. Slashed the first soul right across the throat. Blue blood hissed into the vowglass grooves. Then another. Then a third. Too many. They fell back. But he was already moving toward the glass again. Breath ragged. I'm getting you out, he growled. You can't. Eryan's voice was strangled now. The vow root. It is me now. If you break it. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Rovek stared at him. Realized. And his knees buckled. If I break the oath, you die. Eryan didn't nod. He didn't need to. Rovek rose slowly. His hands were shaking. His blade trembled in his grip. The chain still burned, but now it felt like it was searing through him instead of for him. He looked up at the boy who had once kissed him in a ruined chapel and said he didn't believe in gods. Only in them. And now that boy was the very heart of a system designed to erase gods and remake wolves. He reached toward the glass again. Eryan flinched. Don't. Why? Because if you touch me again, I might want to go. Rovek froze. And in the silence, the roots pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat, like a trap, like a god's whisper. Then the earth shook. The chamber groaned. Cracks rippled along the ceiling. From above came a sound like a bell being torn in half. Then a voice. Cold. Unmistakable. He came to steal my new god? Lucan. Rovek spun, dagger ready. Mirrors along the wall lit one by one. And Lucan's reflection burned across every surface. His image shifting like smoke. Fury thick in every line of his face. You should have died in the northern purge, Lucan hissed. I did, Rovek said. But your chains weren't strong enough to keep my soul down. Lucan's smile was thin, cruel. They will be next time. Then he snapped his fingers. The floor beneath Rovek split, and the bone began to scream. Chapter 23, When Gods Begin to Shatter. Light burned like a second sun inside the sanctum. It wasn't warmth. It was raw, searing purity, the kind that stripped flesh from bone and thought from soul. At the summit of the soul vow spire, beneath the unfurling prism dome of the Lightfall heart, the air shimmered with suspended particles of sanctified energy. Mirrors floated like petals across the chamber's edge, each one humming with embedded sigils. And in the center, Rovek was on his knees. Naked, blood-stained, bound at the wrists by mirrored chain that pulsed in rhythm with the vowroot system. He breathed raggedly, his body a map of bruises and lacerations, every inhale dragging fire through his lungs. He'd been dragged here, dragged by Lucan's guards, who now stood at the edge like ceremonial ghosts. Above them, the light grew ever brighter. Eryan stepped into view. Crowned in vow light, he moved like he was underwater, every step slow, deliberate, weighed down by invisible strings. He wore a mantle of woven silver and translucent folds, the garb of the ascended vow-bearer, and on his forehead glowed the faint spiral of the soul-mark sigil. His hair, pale moon silver, trailed past his waist, catching every shard of refracted light like liquid frost. But his eyes, they were fractured glass. He looked at Rovek. His breath hitched. Lucan appeared beside him, calm, composed, a hand gently resting on the small of Eryan's back. "The final step, beloved," he murmured. "No divinity ascends without cost, and no god ascends with attachments." Eryan's lips parted. Lucan turned him to face Rovek fully. "You're not human anymore. You are oath-born, above longing, above guilt, above him." He gestured, and a vow blade rose from the center dais. Forged from condensed oath glass and molten spirit root, it floated midair, sleek, silver, whispering. "Take it," Lucan said softly. "One stroke and you are clean. One act and you are free." Eryan stared at the blade, then at Rovek. His voice cracked. "What is this?" "A trial. One you must pass." Eryan didn't move. Lucan's voice dropped. "Do you feel him? The ache in your chest when you see him? That's not love. That's rot. It weakens your shine." Rovek raised his head. "Then let me rot him," he rasped. "Better my filth stains you than his leash binds you." Lucan ignored him. "Strike, Eryan. The last thread must be cut." Eryan's fingers brushed the floating blade. It glowed. His hand trembled. "You said I would forget him," he whispered. Lucan nodded. "You will, but the body remembers before the mind forgets. End it." Rovek laughed, low and raw. "Do it." Eryan flinched. Rovek leaned forward, dragging his bound wrists until they pressed against the mirrored floor, bowing fully. "I burned for you," he said, voice breaking. "I killed for you. I bled for a ghost. If you still have even a flicker of your soul, kill me now. I would rather die by your hand than be forgotten in another's bed." Eryan took a step forward. The blade followed. Rovek closed his eyes. Eryan raised the weapon, hands shaking violently. "Do it," Lucan said, almost gentle. "Cleanse yourself. This is mercy." The vow blade shimmered in his grip, twin shadows glinting along its edge. Rovek didn't look up, and Eryan wept. The first tear fell silent, then the second. His breath trembled. The grip on the sword faltered. His lips moved. You still dream of me?" Rovek's voice came hoarse. "Every night." Lucan stiffened. Eryan looked down at his hand, at the blade meant to cut the last tether of his soul. And then, without warning, he turned it. A gasp ripped through the chamber. The priest stepped back. Lucan's eyes widened, and Eryan plunged the blade toward his own chest. "No!" Lucan reached too late. The sword met resistance, an invisible barrier of vow light flickering just above Eryan's heart. It screeched, shattered into fragments of silver flame, and knocked him backward. Eryan slammed into the ground, choking, his palms burning with backlash light. The chain at his throat lit up with blood-red marks. The price of rebellion. Lucan's mask cracked. His rage tore through the sanctum like a blade. "You would rather destroy yourself," he whispered, "than let go of him?" Eryan gasped, still alive, barely. Lucan strode forward and seized him by the jaw, yanking him up to meet his gaze. "You belong to me. I erased your name. I seared your memories. I rebuilt you. And still I remember him," Eryan choked. Lucan's hand trembled. Then he smiled. But it was no longer gentle. "Then you'll learn to remember forever." With a flick of his wrist, vow chains erupted from the dais floor, wrapping Eryan's limbs and dragging him into the void behind the chamber. A descending platform etched with runes of endless time, a mirror prison without sky, without end. No! Rovek roared, struggling against his bonds. Lucan turned to him. You asked for death, he said softly. But death is too brief, too kind. He gestured again. The chains pulled Rovek forward, dragged him across the sanctum floor until he knelt beside the vanishing platform, just as Eryan's shackled form disappeared into the abyss. Rovek shouted. Eryan reached for him with bloodied fingers. Their hands almost touched. Almost. Then the void swallowed him. Lucan's voice echoed in the silence. If he will not be mine in love, he will be mine in eternity. Chapter 24, The Alpha's Second Rejection. The vault of broken vows had no light of its own. It was a hollow carved deep beneath the spire, beneath even the vow roots, where the heat of the blood system no longer reached, where sound went to die, and the air itself felt old. Not cold, not hot, just absent, as if the chamber had forgotten what warmth was, forgotten time, forgotten hope. The walls breathed with pulse glow only when commanded. Otherwise, the cell sat in absolute blackness, soundless save for the gentle hum of vow steel bindings and the faintest, ghostliest scrape of something dragging across stone. Rovek stepped into the dark. He had clawed his way through 100 mirrored gates, fought sigil-bound sentinels, dodged Lucan's entire priest guard, and bled enough to stain the sanctum floors for weeks. But none of it compared to this moment. He stood at the edge of the final threshold. His voice, hoarse and quiet, was the first to touch the cell in days. Eryan. No answer. He stepped forward. The darkness shifted. No, recoiled, like it didn't want to touch him. I know you're awake. I know what they said. I don't care. A flicker of silver gleamed at the far end. A faint shape curled against the wall. Eryan didn't move. He sat motionless, draped in what remained of his vow robes, shredded by backlash light and blood rites, now dulled to ash gray. His hair was tangled, his hands chained behind him, and a sliver of vow glass was embedded in his sternum, pulsing red. He didn't look up. Lucan said you'd lost your mind, Rovek whispered. Said you tried to tear your own soul out with vow fire, that you're no longer safe to be let near the divine. Still nothing. Rovek came closer. Each step felt heavier than the last. You once told me that forgetting was worse than death, he said. But now you sit here, letting them tear you apart piece by piece. That's not madness, Eryan. That's surrender. At last Eryan moved. Barely. A tilt of the head. A flick of the eyes, dull and distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was threadbare. You should not be here. I have to be here. No, Eryan murmured. You don't. You should have left when I told you the first time. Rovek's jaw clenched. That wasn't you. Eryan looked away. His shoulders remained curled inward, a kind of defensive posture that made Rovek's heart twist. I meant it, he whispered. You didn't. Eryan's voice rose, hoarse with something buried too deep to name. I meant it, Rovek. I'm not yours anymore. I don't want to be found. I don't want to be remembered. Then why are you crying? Rovek said. Silence. Just a soft hitch of breath. A glimmer under Eryan's lashes. But he didn't answer. Rovek stepped forward, kneeling in front of him. I let you go once, he said. I thought I was doing the right thing. That letting you walk away from the bond was noble. That pain would fade. But it didn't. Carved me open every night. I slept on ashes. I built fire with your name. And now that I've found you again, now that I know you're still alive under all this. You don't, Eryan said sharply. You don't know anything. You see a face. You feel a pull. You want a happy ending. But I don't have that in me. Not anymore. You're lying. I belong to the vow system now. I breathe because it permits me to. I live in chains made of faith, Rovek. If I try to leave, I die. Then I'll die with you. Eryan turned to him. His eyes were no longer empty. They were full of a grief so wide, so bottomless, it made Rovek want to scream. I'm telling you to go, he said, steady and soft. For the last time. You don't belong here. I don't belong to you. I'm not your mate. I'm not your anything. Rovek stared. Then he stood, took one step back, then another. His voice was barely audible when he said, If I leave now, I become everything I swore not to be. Eryan closed his eyes. Rovek bowed his head. But I'll leave, if that's what you truly want. He waited for the sound, the tremor, the whisper that would say stay. None came, only silence. And when Rovek turned, the last thing he saw was Eryan curled into himself again. Back to the wall, face hidden in his arms. Not a prince, not a god, just a ghost trying not to be remembered. The vault door sealed behind Rovek with a sound like steel swallowing a sob. He didn't cry, not until he reached the underpass where Sivra waited. She didn't say a word, just pressed a small ember-colored object into his palm. A forbidden vowfire core. His pulse was unstable, dangerous, glowing like a heart torn from a star. Sivra's voice was low. This could rupture the entire system, burn every vow in the kingdom. Rovek stared at the ember, then clenched it in his fist. If I can't save him, he whispered, I'll burn the gods who caged him. Chapter 25 The Pact That Burned the Sky. The sanctum trembled. From its heights, the skybound sanctum had once been a place of sacred silence, an aerial crown of vowglass and sunfire spires. Now fire coiled up its ribs. Smoke spilled across the carved gold of the ceiling. And at the center of it all, wrapped in oath light and dying breath, stood Rovek Draelen. He held the vowfire core against his chest, pulsed like a beast trying to wake. Sivra's voice reached him through the collapsing stairs. You light it, we don't get another chance. Not another world. Not another you. He looked down. Beneath the sanctum's suspended altar lay the woven roots of the vow system. The bloodlines, the god spines, the packed ink that made kings into saints and corpses into relics. All of it hummed with Lucan's design. All of it was alive because he was, and all of it had to end. Rovek's voice was raw. I'm not lighting it for another world. I'm lighting it for one man. He slammed the core into the sanctum's seal. The explosion wasn't sound. It was memory, a flash that reached every oath in the kingdom, ripped across the sky like a scream carved in flame. Vow sigils flared, backlashed, melted into ash. Towers cracked. Wolves fell to their knees in fields, in shrines, in temples. And from deep within the sanctum's vault, something uncoiled. A god who had forgotten he was human. Eryan rose. Chains burst around him as the core fire shattered their logic. The vow steel in his bones warped and splintered, ripping bloodless lines down his arms. His eyes flared white. The threads that made up his memory began to return, ribbons of pain, kisses at dusk, a name whispered into snow. Rovek. He saw it. Saw the sanctum tearing apart at the seams. Saw a figure in black armor standing in the fire. Rovek at the center of the inferno. No! He ran. The light shattered around him as he burst through vowglass, dropped down from the skybound dais into the burning chamber below. The impact stole his breath. The heat peeled at his skin. But he saw him, Rovek, slumped against the altar, skin scorched, blood steaming from his collarbone. Don't move, Eryan breathed, falling to his knees. Rovek laughed. Even now, even with flame in his lungs, you're still the most beautiful thing in a room full of fire. Shut up, why would you? Eryan's hands trembled as they pressed against the wounds. They healed nothing. You idiot. This isn't how you save someone. I wasn't trying to save you, Rovek whispered. I was trying to wake you. Eryan's tears fell onto Rovek's skin. Salt on smoke. You could have died. I still might. Then why? Eryan's voice cracked. Why would you burn down the sky for someone who pushed you away? Rovek smiled, weakly. Because you cried. Eryan froze. Rovek's voice dropped to a whisper, eyes fluttering. You finally cried for me. Something cracked inside Eryan. A noise tore from him, raw animal. A sob from the part of the soul that had no words, only grief. You don't get to leave me again, he gasped. You don't get to die for me. Not like this. Not again. Behind them, the flames coalesced. Lucan stood in the inferno like a statue made of war. He did not scream. He did not run. He simply smiled. You see, he murmured to no one, or maybe to the sky itself. Even in death, I am what binds them. His robes had burned away, but his sigils glowed beneath the skin, radiant and unbroken. His body was splitting down the center, vow fire pouring from his sternum. And yet he stood unbending, immortal. Rima appeared through the smoke behind him, bloodied, eyes wide. You should have died in that blast. Lucan turned to her. I already did, he said softly. The moment I knew he would never love me back. He walked into the center of the flame and welcomed it. I carved him into the heart of the kingdom, Lucan whispered. I made him history. You may love his flesh, but He pressed a hand to his chest, where his soul was coming apart. I am his legacy. The sanctum roof split open. Light flooded down from above. Not sunlight, not vow light, something older. The tower of old gods surfaced in the sky, its black ribs breaking through the clouds, ancient glyphs spinning as if summoned by the destruction. It rose like a god's judgment, final, towering. Lucan looked up and laughed. Welcome, he said, to the vow's true end. Eryan held Rovek tighter. As the tower descended, and history itself prepared to shatter. Chapter 26, The Tower That Remembers All. The tower breathed, not like a man, not like a beast, but like something ancient that had forgotten how to die. Stone shifted above them, white as bone and veined with vow light. Its core pulsed with remnants of Lucan's soul, each beat a memory, each light a wound. The tower of the pale oath had risen from the ashes of broken systems, and now it waited, open, endless. At its base, Eryan stood barefoot in the rubble, smoke trailing off his skin. His arms trembled around Rovek's unconscious form. Blood still seeped from Rovek's side, dark and slow, soaking through Eryan's shirt where he carried him. The wound would not clot. The breath came shallow. Time was slipping, but Eryan would not. He pressed his forehead to Rovek's. You stay with me, he whispered. You're not done yet. The tower opened with a low groan. Not doors, memories. A ring of pale flame circled them, rising like mist. And within it Eryan saw a vision. 2 boys, a sacred altar, snow falling in sheets, and a silver mark burning into a child's wrist. His wrist. He choked, eyes going wide. I remember this. The child in the vision stumbled, screaming as the mark seared deeper. And from the crowd, someone had stepped forward. Lucan. Not the priest, not the oath weaver, but the boy. Just a boy with silver in his hair and fear in his eyes, as he grabbed the blade and cut the mark into his skin instead. I'll take it, Lucan had said years ago. Give me the curse. Leave him. It was Lucan who bore the first vow. Lucan who bled so Eryan could live. Eryan clutched Rovek tighter. He saved me. And that was how the prophecy began. Not with war, but with love twisted into fate. He stepped into the flame. And it hurt. Every ring of memory that surrounded them flared as they passed. The tower was alive with their past, each layer a phantom cut from his soul. He saw his first day at the royal sanctuary, kneeling before vow stone, fingers trembling. Then another step, the first time Rovek looked at him across the temple halls. Then another, their first argument, their first kiss, the first lie. Eryan's knees buckled. The pain was no longer just emotional, it was physical. His vow blood was reacting, pouring backward through his veins, resisting the reversal of time. Every memory reclaimed meant a piece of him was breaking. Behind his ribs, something cracked. Still he climbed, step by step, carrying Rovek's weight like penance. The tower curled upward around them, the flame rings narrowing. Each level demanded more blood, more memory, more truth. There was no hiding from the tower. Not here. The fifth ring lit. The night he said, "I accept your rejection," and meant it. The pain lanced through his spine, and he almost dropped Rovek. But Rovek stirred. "Eryan." The voice was barely a breath, but it was his. "Don't stop." "I'm not," Eryan gasped. "I won't." The sixth ring. The night Rovek kissed someone else to forget him. It played out before him, seared into vow light, cruel and slow. Eryan squeezed his eyes shut. "I forgive you." His blood boiled at the lie. The tower knew. Forgiveness didn't matter here. Only memory did. By the ninth ring, Eryan was coughing blood. "Rovek," he whispered, falling to his knees. "Please, say something. Say you still want me." Silence. Just the tower's hum, and the weight of a dying man in his arms. Eryan curled over him. "I'm so tired of being strong." The flame around them turned crimson. "You weren't meant to carry this," came a voice from above. Familiar, drenched in sorrow. Lucan stood at the apex of the tower, woven in gold and vow fire, no longer fully flesh. His eyes were lightless. His form flickered like a dying star. "You were supposed to forget," he said softly, "and let him live." Eryan looked up. "I remember everything." Lucan nodded. "Then you know why I did what I did. You took away my choices. I gave you time." Eryan set Rovek down gently, kissed his forehead, then rose. "My time is now." Lucan raised a hand. "If you reach the last memory, your blood will unbind. You'll die, and so will he." Eryan's lips trembled. "Then we'll die as we lived, remembering each other." A crack ran through the tower's core. Lucan closed his eyes. "I loved you. I know. You never looked at me like you looked at him. I know." Lucan stepped aside. The final memory bloomed behind him, white, endless, tender. Eryan walked into it, and for a moment he was not divine, not cursed, not bound. He was just a boy who had once loved another boy beneath a winter sky. And it was enough. Chapter 27. The Oath Between Three Graves. Snow fell softly on the altar. Not the kind born of sky and season, but of memory turned to ash, drifting through the tower's ruined heart. The pale oath stone at the summit of the world pulsed with dying light, faint veins of vow fire still threading through its cracks like the final heartbeat of a forgotten god. Eryan knelt at its edge, Rovek's body cradled in his arms. The Alpha's breaths were slow, shallow, each one a quiet war against the cold. The edges of his lips had turned pale. Blood matted his hair. His eyelids fluttered but never opened. "He won't last," Lucan said. His voice echoed around the altar like wind through shattered glass. Eryan looked up. Lucan stood in the remnants of the tower's godhood. No longer man, no longer monster. Just shadow and light, draped in vow chains that floated like dying constellations around his form. His eyes burned silver, but the fury was gone. Only weariness remained. "I didn't want to be the end of your story," Lucan murmured. "But I won't be erased from it either." Eryan said nothing. His hand trembled as he brushed blood from Rovek's brow. Lucan stepped forward, his feet not quite touching the ground. "I have a proposal." Eryan's gaze sharpened. "What kind of proposal?" "Let me remain here. Let this tower be my grave, my curse, my prayer." Lucan's voice softened. "And I will give him back to you." Eryan held Rovek tighter. "What's the cost?" Lucan's smile was thin. "You already know." The oath stone between them hummed to life. Its light spiraled upward, forming a mirror of Eryan's soul in midair. Twin reflections. Two halves of a being carved by love, duty, and pain. Lucan gestured to the one on the left. "This is your wolf self, the part that remembers every touch, every rejection, every ache. The part that loved him." His hand moved to the right. "And this is your divine self, the one that was born the moment you refused to kill him." "You want me to choose?" Eryan whispered. "I want you to forget," Lucan said. "Only by giving up your tether to him can you escape the net of vows. Love is your binding. Let it go." Eryan stared into the twin specters of himself. The wolf self pulsed like fire, messy, warm, real. The divine self was cold, still unburdened. Behind him, Rovek stirred. A weak sound slipped from his lips. "Eryan!" Eryan broke. "He's carried my pain long enough," he said. "My guilt, my scars. I made him bleed for a bond he never asked to bear." He rose slowly, fingers trailing through Rovek's hair one last time. "If someone has to be hollowed out to survive, then let it be me." Lucan stepped back as Eryan reached for the blade embedded in the altar. A vow-carved relic, humming with memory. Eryan gripped the hilt with both hands. His knuckles went white. Then he turned to his wolf self. It looked at him with Rovek's eyes, and Eryan raised the blade. "No," Rovek whispered, barely audible. But it was too late. The sword came down. Light burst from the altar, searing through the snow. The tower screamed. Chains of memory snapped and twisted, vanishing into white. Eryan fell to his knees, howling in silence as a part of him, the part that had loved, kissed, ached, was carved out and sealed. His body remained whole. His soul did not. When the light faded, Eryan stood alone beside Rovek's unconscious body. His eyes were dry, his breath even. But there was a quiet emptiness behind them, a glassy stillness that no vow could touch. Lucan approached, more ghost than god now. "You finally understand," he said. Eryan didn't answer. "You sacrificed not for power," Lucan continued, "but to save the one thing you couldn't bear to see ruined." His tone was almost gentle. "That is godhood, Eryan Thayre, and its price is everything you were." Lucan turned toward the edge of the tower, where the vow light had dimmed entirely. "This is where I stay." He took one step, and the ground beneath him shimmered into flame. "Wait," Eryan said, then blinked, unsure why he had spoken. Lucan glanced over his shoulder. "You won't remember me," he said, "but I'll remember you. That's enough." Then he walked into the fire. Eryan stood frozen, arms limp at his sides, as the god who had once chained him burned quietly into the tower's last prayer. Behind him, Rovek stirred again. "Eryan!" he groaned, voice hoarse. Eryan turned. Their eyes met. Rovek blinked, confusion blooming slowly. "You're—" He paused, searched the face in front of him. His breath hitched. "Who are you?" Eryan tilted his head. "I don't know," he said quietly. The snow began to fall again. This time it did not burn. Chapter 28 When the Alpha was forgotten. The tower fell like a dying god. Its spires, once white as bone, were now 1,000 ribbons of light breaking apart in the storm. The ground buckled beneath the weight of collapsing vows, their runes burning into the soil before vanishing. From far below the towerfall ridge, the echo of shattering oaths rolled across the valley like thunder. Every promise made beneath the old order screamed before dissolving into silence. Rovek carried Eryan through the smoke. His arms were raw with burns, his vision red from the heat, but he refused to let go. The man was breathing barely, his skin cold against Rovek's chest. There were no chains left, no crown, no sigil glowing beneath his skin. Only the slow, unsteady rhythm of a heart that had once carried the power to end the world. The forest beyond the ruins was quiet. The wind carried ash and the faint scent of blood. Rovek stumbled until the last remnants of the tower's shadow disappeared from view. Only then did he stop, kneeling beside a stream where silver moonlight turned the water to glass. Eryan stirred. His lashes flickered, silver against the soot on his face. For a moment Rovek's breath caught. He could almost pretend nothing had changed, that the man before him still remembered the nights beneath the bone moons, the whispered promises in their secret tongue. But when Eryan's eyes opened, they were blank. He blinked slowly, confusion bleeding into fear. Where am I? Rovek's throat closed. The name wanted to rise, Eryan. But that name no longer belonged to this man. He forced his voice calm. You're safe. The tower fell. You were caught in it. Eryan touched his temple. I can't remember. Your name is Eryan Thayre, Rovek said quietly. A prince of the southern court. I was one of the soldiers who fought beside you. The lie hurt more than any wound. Eryan frowned faintly. A prince? That doesn't sound like me. Rovek almost laughed. A broken, choking sound. It sounds exactly like you. They camped by the ruins that night. The fire crackled between them, painting Eryan's face with amber light. Rovek watched him as one might watch a ghost, afraid to reach out, afraid to look away. Eryan seemed restless, turning a small fragment of silver stone in his fingers, the last shard of the vow seal that had once burned in his chest. It no longer glowed, but under moonlight it pulsed faintly, like a heart remembering how to beat. There's something strange about this stone, Eryan murmured. It feels familiar. Rovek turned his gaze to the flames. It's nothing, just a relic. Of what? Rovek's voice cracked. Of someone who saved us. Eryan studied him for a moment, as if searching for truth in the flicker of firelight. Then, softly, was it someone you loved? Rovek's hands curled into fists. He wanted to tell him everything. The blood vows, the nights tangled between life and death, the way their hearts had beaten in time like a single beast under the moon. He wanted to scream the truth until the forest remembered it for him. Instead, he whispered, yes. The silence that followed was almost kind. Eryan leaned back, his expression thoughtful, distant. If I really did love someone, he said after a while, his tone almost wistful, he must have been a cruel man, the kind who hurts you just enough to make you stay. A little heartless, a little too gentle. Rovek smiled, and the smile broke him. He was exactly that. The firelight trembled as a gust of cold wind swept through the trees. In its dying glow, Rovek saw a flicker of the old Eryan, head tilted, lips slightly curved, that unspoken question in his eyes. Why do you always look at me like I'm about to disappear? Because you already did. He turned away before the ache could drown him. Later, when Eryan had fallen asleep, Rovek sat beside him, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breathing. The moon hung low, silvering the ash-covered earth. The ruins of the tower were visible in the distance, a jagged skeleton against the stars. From its broken ribs came faint pulses of light, Lucan's final curse settling into the veins of the world. Rovek spoke to the night, to no one. You won, old ghost. He's free. And I'm the one still chained. A breeze stirred the ashes, whispering through the trees like a voice half-remembered. When dawn came, Eryan was already awake, kneeling beside the river. He looked at the water as though seeing his reflection for the first time. I don't think I'm who you say I am, he said quietly. But I'll try to be. Rovek walked to him, the weight of 1,000 unsaid words between them. You don't have to try. Just live. Eryan looked up at him then, the light of sunrise painting gold into his pale hair. Do I know you from before? Rovek swallowed hard. Maybe. In another life. Was I different? Yes. Was I happy? Rovek hesitated. Sometimes. A pause. Then Eryan smiled, small and fragile. Then that's good enough. They traveled north that day, leaving the shattered valley behind. The land was beginning to heal, moss creeping over ruins, rivers clearing from ash. They passed villages where people no longer knelt to invisible gods, where children played with scraps of fallen vows as if they were nothing more than pretty stones. The world was forgetting. Perhaps that was mercy. By the time the sun began to set again, the sky had turned the color of burnt rose. They made camp beneath a tree that had grown from the ruins, its bark pale and veined with faint runes that no longer glowed. Eryan lay on his back, watching the stars emerge. You said we fought together, he murmured. Was I brave? Rovek smiled faintly. You were impossible. That doesn't sound brave. It was more than brave. He didn't add that Eryan had faced gods and refused them all, that he had burned his own name rather than see Rovek die, that he had been the brightest, most defiant creature to ever walk beneath the moons. Eryan closed his eyes. It's strange. I keep dreaming of fire. Rovek froze. Fire and someone's arms around me. But I never see his face. I only know that I wasn't afraid. Rovek turned away, his throat tightening. Dreams lie, he whispered. Maybe, Eryan said softly, but they feel real. He fell asleep soon after, his hand still resting near the faintly glowing vow shard. Rovek stayed awake long into the night, watching the embers die. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a long, mournful note that carried across the forest. Eryan stirred, half asleep, and murmured, That sound! I know it. Rovek looked up at the moon, its light catching on his dark hair, turning the gold in it to fire. You used to. The wind moved again, brushing through the leaves like a sigh, and for an instant Rovek imagined he could hear the faint echo of Eryan's old voice, the one that had said, If you ever forget, I will love you twice. He closed his eyes. The ache was a familiar one, sharp, enduring, and somehow beautiful. The fire burned down to its last coal, the forest breathing quietly around them. When the final ember faded, only moonlight remained, soft, unjudging, endless. And beneath that silver glow, the Alpha kept his vigil beside the man who no longer knew his name. Chapter 29 The Kingdom Without a Name. Ashfell had no banners now, no emblems of moonfire sigils, no crown wolf standard rippling from the ruined ramparts. Just wind curling through the collapsed stone of the once mighty throne hall, carrying with it the scent of ash, pine, and something quieter, something like peace. Rovek stood at the edge of the balcony, the last of the high towers. Below him, the shattered kingdom lay quiet under a veil of morning frost. The snow here never melted, It was as if even time had grown weary and chosen to sleep beneath the cold. Behind him, the new voices of governance gathered, scarred healers, former soldiers, wandering merchants, widowed elders, even children bold enough to speak. The people's council, not of power, but of hope. And further down in the courtyard, Eryan laughed. Rovek watched him from a distance. How easily he moved now, how light his steps were. Eryan sat among a circle of travelers, trying to remember the name of a bird he'd seen perched on the castle ruins that morning. Someone guessed a crow. Another offered thistlewing. He smiled, amused and unburdened, brushing his fingers over a notebook he'd begun filling with names of things he no longer recalled. He hadn't asked about Rovek's scars, or the white-streaked burns running down his spine, or why Rovek looked at him with 1,000 unsaid words tightening behind his teeth. He hadn't asked because he didn't remember. "I thought you'd take the crown," Sivra said, stepping up beside Rovek, her long coat heavy with morning dew. "Half the survivors call you Alpha King already." Rovek didn't look at her. "Let them call me whatever they need." Sivra was quiet for a moment. "You've given them everything. You cracked the sky to save them. Bled yourself hollow for a love that—" "Don't," Rovek said softly. Not harsh, just tired. She exhaled, nodding once. "All right." They stood in silence together, watching as the frost melted on the stone just enough to show a reflection of the sun. Somewhere below, a young girl was painting over a scorched wall with blooming vines and stars. Sivra turned. "You could still tell him." Rovek's eyes finally left Eryan and met hers. "Tell him what?" he asked. "That we burned down a god together? That I once loved him so fiercely I would have torn the world apart to keep him breathing." He gave a bitter smile. "That he used to kiss me like he hated himself for it, and I let him because I did too?" Sivra's throat worked. "I just mean," she whispered. "You haven't saved yourself, Rovek. I never meant to." He looked down again. Eryan was standing now, stretching toward the sun, his head tilted back, a soft laugh slipping free. The golden light caught in his hair, turning it into a crown no one could steal. "He doesn't need saving," Rovek said, almost to himself. "Not anymore." He stepped away from the edge, his voice steady, his breath white in the cold. "I was greedy," he said, "wanting him to choose me, wanting to be remembered." Sivra said nothing. "I don't want to be chosen anymore," he continued. "I just want him to live." Sivra's eyes glistened as the wind picked up. Later that day, Rovek declined the final offer of coronation and left the council chamber without ceremony. He passed through the remnants of the old throne room without looking at the jagged spot where the oathstone had once stood. By dusk, he'd vanished from the keep entirely, leaving behind only a torn cloak and a wolf's carved pendant at the gates. That night, as the fire dimmed and the frost returned, Eryan lay curled under a woolen blanket in the northern wing's guest chamber. Sleep came slowly. When it did, it brought no memory, only a quiet restlessness. His fingers twitched under the sheets, as if reaching for something just out of reach. Then, far off, a howl split the silence. Low, distant, lonely. Eryan stirred, his brow furrowing. He sat up in the dim firelight, turning toward the open window. The sound came again, rising and falling over the hills, threading through the trees like a forgotten lullaby. He pressed a hand to his chest. His heart beat faster for no reason he could name. "That sound," he whispered. A pause. "I feel like I've heard it somewhere before." He stared into the dark until the stars blinked awake. And still he listened. Chapter 30, If the Moon Still Remembers. The moon hung low over the crescent stone forest, casting pale silver across jagged rock and swaying grass. The trees here were old, older than names, older than blood feuds and broken oaths. Their bark shimmered faintly, etched with the passage of countless winters, and the stones that curled like crescent moons around their roots pulsed gently with buried magic, long forgotten by most. Eryan pushed aside a branch slick with dew and exhaled. His breath bloomed white in the cold air, curling toward the light like a question left unanswered. "Anything?" Rovek's voice called quietly from somewhere behind him. "Nothing yet," Eryan answered, glancing around. No signs of the missing patrol. They were meant to be searching for survivors, a pair of scouts last seen crossing this path 2 nights ago. But the forest seemed to swallow all signs of life, even sound. It was too quiet here. Even the wolves kept their distance. Eryan's fingers brushed the carved surface of a low stone, half buried in moss. Something in him tugged, an ache beneath the skin, like when a scar flares in changing weather. He paused. Rovek came up beside him, eyes flicking from stone to tree, then back to Eryan's face. "You all right?" Eryan blinked. "I've been here before." Rovek's body went still. Eryan's voice was soft, almost dazed. "Not during the war. Before. I think I kissed someone here." He looked up at the moonlight dappling between leaves. Rovek didn't speak. The wind picked up. Leaves rustled. Stones breathed. And then Eryan's hand landed on a jagged monument, just a little taller than a man's knee. Worn smooth by time and weather, it bore the faint outline of a rune too old to read. The moment his skin met the stone, a flash, a boy, younger, breathless, bloodied, lunged forward. Arrows flew. He threw his body in front of another boy, darker-haired, fury burning in his eyes. The arrow hit flesh, not the intended target. Blood sprayed across the white bark behind them. Then darkness. Eryan gasped and stumbled backward, hands still outstretched. His heart thundered like a beast in his chest. He pressed fingers to his face. A tear slid down his cheek without permission. I knew this place," he whispered, barely audible. "I knew you." Rovek's voice was rough. "You still do." Eryan turned slowly. His eyes shimmered in the moonlight. "Did I promise you something?" The silence that followed was heavier than any answer. Rovek's jaw flexed, his throat working once, twice. Then, quietly, he said, "You said you'd die for me." Eryan's breath hitched. "But I never wanted that," Rovek continued. "I wanted you to live. For yourself. Not because of a bond. Not because you thought you owed me something. Just live." The wind swirled around them, carrying the scent of night blossoms and old grief. Eryan stepped closer, gaze lingering on Rovek's face, searching for something he couldn't name. "I feel like I'm chasing a shadow," Eryan said softly. "Like the part of me that remembers you is hiding just out of reach. And every time I blink, I lose it again." Rovek offered the faintest of smiles, sad and warm. "Then don't chase it. Let it come when it's ready." They stood there, side by side, not touching, but close enough that their shadows met and stretched together across the forest floor. The moonlight made ghosts of them both, too pale, too fragile, too full of everything unsaid. "I'm not the same person anymore," Eryan murmured. "And you carry so much hurt." "I'd carry it again," Rovek said. "Every wound, every fire, just to have you alive in front of me." Their eyes met. There was something in Rovek's expression, something raw and open, without expectation, without pressure. Just quiet hope. Eryan looked away, then back again, and for the briefest moment, his hand twitched, as if reaching toward Rovek's. But he didn't take it. Instead, he tilted his face to the sky and whispered, "If I ever remember, will it hurt?" Rovek's answer came like an exhale of wind. Yes. They watched the moon rise higher, cold and brilliant above the treetops. No confessions. No reunions. Only the gentle hum of possibility. Later, as they made camp beneath the boughs and lay on opposite sides of the fire, Eryan stared into the flames while Rovek quietly sharpened his blade. They didn't speak again, but in the hours before dawn, Eryan dreamed of a promise spoken under stars, lips pressed to a shoulder, a fire crackling in the distance. He couldn't see the speaker's face, but he heard the words clearly. If you ever forget, I will love you twice. And somewhere in the stone beneath their sleeping forms, an ancient oath stone pulsed faintly, a single word glowing faintly at its base. Remember.